Sorry, Chuck, we didn't see you come in.
Okay, I'm here.
All right. Well, you guys can get going whenever you're ready.
Are we ready to go?
I think so, or at least Will can give his introduction, and by then we'll be ready.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Will?
All right. Well, welcome everyone. If this is your first time joining us, we're happy to have you here. But you'll notice that everyone is muted, and you're all going to stay muted throughout the duration of the meeting. Following each presentation and agenda item, co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon and pressing the raise hand button. It's not the wave or the thumbs up. Those will disappear, and we won't see those. Only press the raise hand button once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're on the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once one of the co-chairs calls on you. The chat is available for technical support only to help with the Zoom software, not to ask questions or make comments to the co-chairs or presenters. They will never see those chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you'll want to go to the participants section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. And finally, we ask you not to raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. If you're having problems, chat me. I'm here to support. And I'll hand it back over to Chuck and Craig.
Okay, I guess we should call the meeting, the March meeting of the Transportation Committee to order. I'm Chuck Warren, co-chair of the committee, and Craig Lader, my other co-chair. Welcome, everyone. Our first item is a public hearing on 108 East 79th Street, application for a new revocable consent to construct, maintain, and use a new sidewalk planted area with lighting. So do we have someone here from the applicant to speak?
Yes, I believe so. Les, is that you?
That's me. Good evening.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay,
Identify yourself then.
Okay, so good evening to the Community Board 8. My name is Les Schmerzler. I'm the applicant of record for the Department of Transportation Revocable Consent Petition to place the planters on the north side of the sidewalk of East 79th Street in front of the new building at 109 East 79th Street, located between Park Avenue and Lexington Avenue. So I'm just going to present a couple of people who were with me. Is Dean Honofilis, who took the drawings that we put together and filed it with the DOT to get the approved petition on December 17, 2021. And after that, Matt Jarrett, who's the landscape architect who designed the planters and the plantings inside of it. The planters are decorative containers. The location was designed in collaboration with the design architect for 109 East 79th Street and the landscape architect pursuant to the DOT rules and regulations found in the DOT Street Design Manual. Meeting the requirements such as walkable width of sidewalk between the planter and the street pit locations and a proper distance away from the Simon's connection on the building as per FDNY. I will now introduce Dean, who will review with you the process of the DOT revocable consent. And then after that, Matt Jarrett, who designed the street furnishings, will also talk. All yours.
Hi, good evening. Hi, how are you? Good evening, everyone. My name is Dean Harder-Phillips. I'm with Domani Consulting, and as Les said, I represent 109 East 79th Street project. I handled all the DOT filings for the building for the revocable consent for the planters on the sidewalk with the lighting, and yeah, so I submitted all the paperwork and all the petition forms and all the and the actual drawings that we coordinated with to the DOT revocable consent unit, and everything on their end as far as plan wise, everything was approved as far as what they're looking for to see on the plan for the planters, and now we are here. So with that, I give you Matt Jarrett, who is the landscape architect, who can share insight on the actual design and on the actual structure itself. That I give you, Matt Jarrett.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Jarrett. I am landscape architect for the project. And would it be helpful if I could share my screen and maybe just show a few images of the project?
Go for it.
Okay. Hopefully everybody can see this. This is a artist's depiction of the front of the building. You can see the main entry here, the awning projecting out. And we have two planters on either side of the main entry, where we have some bleached carpinus trees planted there. You'll see this is an evening shot. We have some very soft lighting to kind of silhouette the backs of the trees. These planters are essentially created by a granite curb, and they drain freely into the ground. So there's no kind of water or irrigation water spilling out on the sidewalk and staining the sidewalk or anything. It's all neatly self-contained. Let's see. Here's a rendered view during the daytime. You can see a little bit further down the street where we have some boxwood planting, just neatly clipped evergreen shrubbery to kind of just give a little bit of green and softness to the base of the building. And one more shot, looking straight on. So all in all, it's aesthetically fairly simple plan, but I think very elegant and fitting within the neighborhood. And if at this point, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Reminder, if you have questions, you can go to the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen and press the raise hand button there.
Let's see if there are any members of the public that want to comment on this application. Anybody there? Well, do we see?
Right now, I only see board members.
Okay. So Michelle Birnbaum, I think, is first. So can we unmute Michelle?
Yes, thank you very much, Chuck. I believe that there was a presentation delivered to us with our agenda today. It was documents that you could see online. I fully expected that to be part of the presentation tonight. This picture doesn't talk to us about dimensions, depth, size, or anything. So I believe you do have a more extensive presentation. Am I wrong?
We do have this drawing set, which I believe
exactly. I would like, if you wouldn't mind, to go through that for us, and then I'll see if I have additional questions. I have questions, but I think it makes more sense to take a look at this first, and then I'll ask them. So if you'll come back to me when this is presented.
Sure. So if everybody can see the little hand cursor here, this is the main entry that we're looking at here. Flanked on the left side and right side by the bleached carpinus trees, which were the taller trees in the image. Going down the street, we have the rows of evergreen boxwood at the base. And what's shown in red here is what I described earlier as that granite curb that creates the edge of the planter. And all these plants are planted actually in the ground. So everything drains into the ground as well and not out onto the sidewalk. I think this is probably the most telling plan of showing what's happening. We have these street trees out in the front as well. And you can see this dimension here of 16 foot 6 inches from the curb to these planters. The street trees take up 5 feet of that. So there's 11 foot 6 of clear space between planter and street tree, which is a fairly nice dimension.
Yeah, and the dimensions are in there, right? You have the dimensions.
Yeah, everything's dimensioned on this plan, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I know you have other pages for this, but you're not being as openly forthcoming as I would like. But
Well, do you want to see other pages? Did you want to see some?
well, if there's more information,
there are
because
for
I'm
the
looking
pages,
down
yeah.
the sides, I see that there's more information. So
We can of course go through page by page. I don't know, Dean, would it be beneficial for you to kind of give a you know, a little bit of input on some of these pages, since you're much
I can do
more
that.
versed in drawing?
Okay, so this is Les. So the first page is basically a plot plan and showing the planters without the greenery in it, just to give it the dimensions where they are. So the first two, which you described, is flanking the main entrance. The third one to the right is we've gone as much towards the Lexington Avenue side as possible, with leaving the proper distance for the Siamese connection, as per the fire department's request, is not to block the fire connection to the building. So the drawing that we did have up there beforehand was just a larger scale of this and a little more detailed. We'll also show you over here, there was one existing tree that is remaining. That's on the bottom right-hand side at the property line. And there's 2 trees that are being replaced going back towards the entrance. So we could go to the next drawing. That shows the existing trees to be removed, the one to be protected, the new trees to be put in. Also all approved. And the next one. A little more detail showing the sidewalk, showing the dimension of the entrance.
You can see the scoring pattern of the sidewalk here.
Okay, and the next one. This is where we were. And if we want to scroll to the right a little bit, that's where the Siamese connection is, to the right of the longer planter. So we're leaving that dimension open. And as Jared mentioned before, we're leaving 11 foot 6 from the edge of the new tree pit to the edge of the curb for the planter. And in the next drawing is that all the trees were chosen that were New York City Department of Parks and DOT approved. So we have the fire department's good with it, DOT is good with it, Parks Department's good. And the reason why it's a revocable consent is because we're on the sidewalk, and any work that is placed on any street furnishings placed on the sidewalk requires a revocable consent from DOT. So if in any case or reason they choose to revoke the revocable consent petition that was approved, then they would be removed because the sidewalk is deemed as city property.
Okay. Michelle, you want to carry on?
Oh, am I unmuted? Good. Okay. So when you say on the city property, you mean it's extending past the building line? Past the
Yeah.
sight line of the building?
Yes.
Beyond,
How much?
yeah,
How much?
beyond 6 feet. Is
6 feet
from the
beyond the building line.
from the face of the building, the planters come out 6 feet.
6 feet additional.
Yeah, consent is needed for anything that's actually beyond 3 feet
Yes.
out. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
we
that's why.
do
Yeah.
these,
Yeah, no, I
these all
understand.
the time, so we,
Yeah, no, we know that. I just wanted to see how much. I can't read it all that easily. You said you were removing a tree? Did I hear you correctly?
They were already removed because right now the building's in construction. It's nearing completion. So yeah, those the two trees they're already removed during construction, and the one tree remained, and they're going to be. And then at the end of construction, we're required to plant them back as per the Parks Department.
Right, exactly. That was the issue I was going to raise. So you removed 2 for construction, but those 2 will be replaced in addition to
Right.
1 or 2 that remain during. Okay.
Right.
And will they be replaced in kind, the size and age of the tree that you removed?
Yes, well, yeah, the parks, the Parks Department, they tell us which trees to put back. It's what they want. Yeah, whatever species. I don't have the actual exact species, but actually it's just to be clear, actually it's 3 trees that were removed and 3 are going back out of the 4. So there were 4 trees in front of our property, 1 remained. The far right, on the plan you can see the far right tree was existing and protected, and then the 3 in front were removed and already approved to be removed. They've been removed for quite some time now during construction, and we're planting 3 back on site in those locations.
Okay. What is the width of the building, the entire width of the building?
Let's see.
100 feet, is that correct?
100 feet?
Yeah, I'd have to check back
Yeah.
at the plot plan. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, let's see. Well, there's all dimensions, so we can add this all up. But
It's showing 100,
there.
right?
Right there.
yeah, 100. Yeah, 100 feet. Yeah.
Okay, it's showing 100 feet. Now you have a planter on either side of the entrance, and the actual dimension of the planter is 6 feet by what?
On the left, it's 11 foot, 10 inches. And on the right, it is 17 foot, 1 inch.
Now, is there any reason you made that one on our right that much bigger? I know you had the 17 feet, but did you consider making it congruous to the others?
We did the plantings symmetrically, the tree plantings, but we wanted to maximize the amount of planting in front of the building. So we stopped at the doors and left the doorways open just to add as much greenery as we could.
What do you mean you stopped at the doors? You have one on either side of the door, and then you have that last one on the right.
So that would be and then also the service entry. So if we go back to the rendering,
Yeah.
the 3 trees, Matt, I forget the species. So those are symmetrical.
Correct.
And then it drops down with the hedges up to the service door.
Right here.
Yeah, I'm talking about to the right of the service door. You've extended that 17 feet. Now, so it's not symmetrical to anything, to any of your other plantings. And considering that you're coming 6 feet out into public property, which I'm not enthusiastic about to start with, but I could maybe live with it. With the greenery on either side of the door, it's symmetrical, it sort of calls for it, the canopy defines the space somewhat. But to arbitrarily have an additional 6 foot by 17 foot of greenery going past the service door, to me, that is an arbitrary thing, and I wouldn't want to see that much intervention into the public way. So those are actually my comments. Thank you. Oh, one last comment. Are you going to keep the planting size, that size? In other words, will the trees on either side of the doorway be kept to that height and that dimension? And would the greenery under them be kept to a certain height and dimension?
That's correct. Yeah. What you're seeing is the kind of maintained dimension for the plantings.
And that'll be maintained. Talk to us a bit about the lighting. Where is
Sure.
it? What will it reflect?
So the lighting is really just washing the wall a little bit and just a little bit of the face of the trees here, just to give them a soft glow.
So they're set in right beyond the planting and behind the planters.
They're
They're
inside.
uplights, they're wall
Uplight.
washers.
They're not meant to be seen. They're just in the planter, just giving a little soft glow up the wall and up the trees.
And how will those lights be adjusted during the day, the night, and the wee hours of the night, middle of the night?
I believe they'll be on a timer.
So what will the illumination be? It'll go from what to what and when?
I'm not 100% sure. It's more of a
If you require that information, we can talk to the building owner, what their
more of an
intentions are.
operations.
And if there's
Well, I
something that
think
if
for
there's
the-
something you would like, we can work with them.
Yeah,
to
because I
that's amenable to you.
think the brightness is relevant to the neighbors. You know, how bright do you plan to turn these off during the day and only put them on at night? And how late will they go? And are they the same luminescence all evening into the middle of the night? I mean, how does even your lobby lights are quite bright because you have a glass front. Will those be adjusted with the nighttime hours? I think this is pretty bright on what would otherwise be a dark street. That's good from a safety point of view, but we want to make sure that it's not invasive. So I think knowing what the timing is and what the brightness is would be helpful.
Okay, so we as designers do not have that information, but I can get that from you, from the owner, and pass it over to you.
Okay, or a lighting designer. You must have had a lighting designer that worked with the landscape person, I assume. At any rate, I'm not comfortable since you are on public property, and ordinarily I'm not comfortable with that usually, but the additional 17 feet on either side of the doorway to me is extraneous and an imposition. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have one public member, Stephanie Reckler.
Yes,
Mm.
it's Stephanie Reckler.
Right.
I've watched this has not quite the landscape situation, but I've watched the building go up, and the first 2 floors, it appears to me, are faced in different stone. Is there an explanation for that? And perhaps that could be the reason why the planter on the, as we face the building on the right, extends beyond the trees. It almost appears to me that you've run out of stone, and therefore there are 2 different stones, type of stones that are used to face the first two floors of your building?
Right. Unfortunately, that's more of an architectural question. I'm not involved with the architecture of the building, but with the landscape of it. But yes, there are two different stone treatments on the facade.
But the planter that Michelle questioned, extending, does it extend to the other type of building facing?
The one immediately to the right of the main entry?
Correct.
It does. It goes to the service door, but the bleached carpinus stay within the kind of boundaries of the one type of stone at the main entry.
But there appears to be no reason to have extended it if it's extended to the other type of facing.
Yeah, we felt, I mean, we didn't want to just cut everything with harsh lines. We wanted to allow some of the planting to overlap a little bit, to make a little bit more of a contiguous landscape on the street level and not have it feel too bitty. So that was just one of the, design objectives that we were using when laying out the planters.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Peter Borak, can we unmute Peter?
Thanks, everyone. I'm having some trouble with my mic. Can folks hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So thanks so much. First of all, I just have to say, Michelle, those were some really good questions. Thanks. That was great. I just have two follow-up questions. One is it possible to go back to the plans just to take off from Michelle's comments about the extension? I just want to see, is it possible to show us the intrusion to the public space that's contemplated compared to, this is a corner? I see. Okay. And the minimum space would be 11.6, have I heard that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. That's
from the edge of the tree pit to the curb of the planter.
Okay. I think that's not unreasonable. I have to say, I think aesthetically, I like the trees a lot. I think you guys as designers did a really good job. I'm not sure if I heard you correctly. Are those local trees, local native species, or is it the trees that you're replacing as opposed to the additional trees? Species. So the square-looking trees on the side of the entrance, are those native?
The square trees are not part of the replacement trees. They're in addition to the replacement of the street trees. Is that answering your questions?
That answers sort of the first part. So are those trees native species?
They are not native species. No, they are. They're planted all over New York. They're a very common tree, but their origins are European.
I would just note for the record, I think there's a huge bee issue. The bees dying off, and we really need to do our part to plant native trees. I'm still going to support this, but I think just going forward, I would urge you as designers in the city to try and encourage your clients to plant native trees on a go-forward basis. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
It looks like we have another public member that I see. It says AM's pad. Can you identify?
Yes.
yourself?
Hi, my name's Alexandra Wald. I live right across the street at 120 East 79th Street, really directly facing. And so I've watched the construction and, it is quite bright, even just now with the lights lit up in the building as it's under construction. So I really wanted to echo that, I appreciate that concerns were raised about the brightness of that lighting and the timing of that lighting, because it will be extremely visible from across the way. So I just wanted to share that with you, that that is my experience from directly across. And I would guess it's not only me in my building, because it's the entire building faces. Thank you.
Thank you. Alita Camp.
Thanks. I have 3 points. Excuse me. One is following up on the last speaker, Ms. Wald, which is that we don't know what the lighting's going to look like. So I would ask that if there are complaints about the lighting, that the owner or the managing agent sit down with the community board or city council members, preferably the community board, to talk about the lighting issue so that accommodation could be made for the people across the street. Second, I'm not sure how I feel about the width. 6 feet is really deep. And I'd have to agree that with Peter, that native trees, even if other trees have been planted around the city, the time has come for much more interest in native trees. And we've seen that all over the place. They benefit the birds and the bugs, not the disgusting bugs, but the useful bugs, and the birds around, and they are much better because they're made to be in the environment. So if there's any opportunity for that, I would say to do that. And then last, given the way the trees look, there's an awful lot of shaping of square trees. And so that would lead to a lot of debris, plus it looks like deciduous trees where the leaves would fall off in the fall. So I would ask that if this is approved, that the building not use those gas-powered leaf blowers to blow the leaves, which I often see going onto someone else's property. They're noisy, they're bad for the environment, and they don't do a whole lot of good except blow the leaves around. So I would ask that that be part of any resolution to approve it, or that the building just separately agree on an environmental point of view and noise for all of the neighbors not to use those gas-powered leaf blowers. Thank you.
Thanks, Lita. Let's see, costs. Spagnoletti, can we unmute?
Yeah, if there's a resolution to be made, then I move that we approve.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Barry Schneider.
Barry Schneider seconded. Okay. Is Rita Popper? Rita, did you want to say something?
I just want to tell you that having lights that hit the sidewalk at night, we come home late from meetings, we come home late from the theater, and I have to tell you that as a single person, I really appreciate all the lights that we can have, especially, and we know what's going on streets where stores have closed and there is no ambient light and the streets are very dark. I'm not a horticulturist. I think this looks lovely. And I hope that the members of the board will approve it.
Thank you, Rita. Michelle, I think, is our last speaker that I see. Go ahead, Michelle. Oh, Mrs. Brown is after us. Okay. Go ahead, Michelle. Well, let me have Mrs. Brown speak first. You've spoken once before, and we'll come back to you. Can we unmute Mrs. Brown?
Go ahead,
Yes.
Ms. Brown.
Yes, call the question.
Can we hold off, Mrs. Brown? Can we hold that off?
Sure.
Let
Michelle.
Michelle have the last word, and then you can call the question, just because she had her hand up. Go ahead.
Thank
Michelle.
you, Chuck. Thank you. In my previous chat with the presenters, I realized that the planter that they were talking about, because they kept saying 17 feet, is the one on the other side of the doorway. But the one I was talking about is in fact 24 feet. That is on the other side of your service entrance. And that's the one that I think is sort of completely gratuitous. It's 24 feet in the public way. I realize it still permits clearance. There's 11.6 clearance for the pedestrian way until the tree pit, but that's not totally the question. That's a good thing, of course, but it is an overwhelming structure on a public sidewalk, 6 feet by 24.10, and it's not serving to decorate or offset anything. It doesn't call attention to an entryway. it doesn't do anything. It's just sitting out there 24 feet. I mean, if you picture your homes or your rooms, it's hard to get a room that's 24 feet long. I mean, this is really tremendous. And because of that, and because we don't have the lighting information, and this is an issue, and I think we should have the lighting information, I would propose either that we turn this down or that we don't vote on it and we ask the applicants to come back with the lighting and any consideration that they could give to that additional tree bed. When are they due to be heard?
Michelle, let me suggest that we vote on this in the committee. It's going to come up in the full board, but they get back to us before the full board. And if we have to make a change in the full board, we will.
We only
Okay.
get 30 days to hear these two, by the way.
Yeah, so we don't want to ask for, to put it off if we don't have to.
Okay,
Oh,
that's fine, Chuck. That's fine because you can get the information about the lighting by then. So
Right.
that's fine. I'm going
Easily.
to oppose because I'm not happy about the additional 24, almost 25 feet, 2410. I don't think that's appropriate, but thank you.
Sure. Okay, let's see here. Barry, I guess Barry Schneider has not talked before. Barry, can we unmute Barry?
Yes, I'm seconding calling the question.
Okay. All in favor of calling the question, say aye. Or if you're not in favor, raise your hand.
Right. Let me
Okay.
just read the list of who's here at this moment. We have myself, Chuck, Alita, Barry, Kaz, Lori, Michelle, Mrs. Brown, Paul, Peter, Rita, Sharon, Valerie. And I thought I saw on here, I think that's it for now. If anyone who's on the board did not hear their name, please raise your hands.
Got everybody, Craig?
I think that's everyone.
Okay, so this is a motion to approve. And for anyone who wants to vote no or abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, we have Paul. Can we unmute Paul?
Paul, you're unmuted.
Great, thank you. I vote no. I
Okay,
don't,
and Michelle?
No.
Okay. Do you see any other hands raised there?
Alita.
Alita.
I'm voting no too.
Okay. Any others? I think that's it. Do you see any others, Will or Craig?
No.
Okay, so that's proved, but I want to tell the applicants that our next, I think this is coming up on the 9th, isn't it? Aren't we having a joint meeting on the 9th? So this is coming up a week from today, and we need you to get with the building and talk to them about the lights in regard to the plantings and also the light with regard to the building and how that's handled as you get later in the night, as Michelle Birnbaum had.
Okay.
Talked to. So hopefully that shouldn't take you long, and I would hope you get back to us.
Okay.
And get back to Will Bright-Bill at the board office.
I will do that. I'll get you their lighting program. And if you have any input you want the lights to be dim throughout the night or to be off, or what can I tell them that you would prefer?
Well, I think we'd like less intrusion. Obviously it's a combination. Rita had raised the issue that there's some lighting on the sidewalk, is helpful when it gets late. But I think in general, we'd like the lights down,
I think the subtlety is really what everybody's saying.
Yeah, particularly when it gets to be late at night.
Okay.
Thank you. And okay, Craig, rather, why don't you go ahead on item M2?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Before we do that, Mrs. Brown has her hand up. I don't know if that was in reference to this previous item.
Yes, is it possible for the applicant to reach out to the resident across the street with regard to the lighting, since she has noticed how bright it is during the construction. Perhaps he could have some input, so by the time he meets next week, they have a sense of how dim it should be or could be.
Okay, so we've been communicating with Will. So Will, if I can ask that anyone from Community Board 8 has any items that they want to talk about the lighting or suggestions, go to you, and then I can communicate with you from what the owner has to say.
But
That's
there was
great.
there was a resident across the
Yes.
street from the building.
Yeah.
Who spoke earlier.
Yes.
So if they can let Will know, and then I'll communicate with Will as a point
Thank
person.
you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. I see. I think that's acceptable. I see. Yes. If I'm reading
Thank
lips. Thanks. Okay,
Yes.
thanks. And you'll get
Okay,
back
thank
to us,
you.
and will be in touch on this
Okay,
too.
and I'll get you some answers.
Thanks a lot, Alex.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, Craig, I'll turn over to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Chuck. Item 2 is a discussion of redesigning 3rd Avenue within Community District 8 for enhanced safety and usability. So a little background on this item. Those of you who were in attendance in the December meeting may recall we had a discussion about potential future bike lane corridors. And within that discussion, the idea of 3rd Avenue was raised, and I had introduced Paul Crickler, who was not quite yet a member of Community Board 8, but is now, and he has been involved in an effort to redesign 3rd Avenue down between 24th and 42nd Street. And it seemed that as if that was a potential model for something we may want to look at here and determine whether we may want to ask DOT to study such a concept. So we figured this was an opportunity to provide a little background on this concept and to talk about some opportunities that could exist to re-envision 3rd Avenue within Community District 8. So I'm going to allow Paul to speak right now, and I know it's one of his partners who he's working with further down on 3rd Avenue who's going to do a little presentation here. So Paul, if you're unmuted, you can speak now.
Thank you very much, Craig. Evening, everybody. I want to be very brief. I want to pass this on to Barack Friedman, who will tell you about the vision that we have. The genesis, very briefly, was that we were talking less than 10 months ago, Barack and myself, about how unpleasant it was to be on 3rd Avenue, pretty much anywhere up and down the avenue. Unpleasant if you're trying to cross the street, unpleasant trying to use the sidewalk if it's a narrow part where there's scaffolding and there's garbage. It's just unpleasant, and it's also a deadly experience. And this drove us to come up with a vision for what we hope would be a much nicer, more pleasant place to live and get around on, and also be less deadly, be safer. So we've made great progress, we think, in the stretch that we started on, which is 24th to 42nd. Barack lives in Midtown on 3rd Avenue down there. I used to live until recently on 93rd and 2nd. So we thought we'd start down there because of other things Barack will tell you about. But now we think it's the right time to tell you about this vision that we have. We hope you enjoy seeing the vision. We think it's going to be a great way to live compared to what we have now. I'm going to hand it over to Barack to show it to you.
Hey, everybody. Barack Friedman. Thank you, CB8, for allowing me to speak. I'm just going to try to share my screen here. And we'll just do a slideshow. All right. So I'm going to be talking about 3rd Avenue as a complete street. And we like to call it the new 3rd Avenue Boulevard, or the new 3rd Avenue Boulevard proposal. It's a grassroots campaign. And so to define the problem, our sidewalks are really narrow and crowded and very unpleasant. And meanwhile, if you look at the space for cars, there's 7 lanes for cars. This is on 26th and 3rd. And going up to CB8 territory, 64th and 3rd, the situation's honestly pretty much the same. You see the sidewalks are pretty crowded. You see children, you see somebody in a wheelchair walking. Whereas again, all the space in 3rd Avenue pretty much is for cars. So what does that translate into for somebody who lives on 3rd Avenue? It's loud, it's polluted, and honestly, it's a dangerous highway through a residential neighborhood. So the question is, how car-free is New York City? And this is according to the US Census Bureau. If you look at all 5 boroughs, 54.5% of households are car-free. But I know you're more interested in Manhattan. And so looking at Manhattan, 76.6% of households are car-free. The median household income of Manhattan is $75,575. For those households that have a vehicle, it's $134,000. For those who don't have a vehicle, the median income is $69,630. So this is really an equity issue of space. So looking at 3rd Avenue, it's 100 feet across, 70% are for cars, 30% are for people with 15 feet wide sidewalks. So a key part of the new 3rd Avenue Boulevard proposal is to widen our sidewalks. You can see how narrow they are. And just like we heard from the last speaker, even though this sidewalk is supposed to be 15 feet, there's trees here, which we love trees, but there's less space for pedestrians. Looking at buses on 3rd Avenue, essentially the M101, M102, M103, as well as there's multiple express buses which go up 3rd Avenue. But the M101 carries 22,398 riders a day. And we see it's a grade of F with an average speed of 5 miles per hour, worse than 85% of New York City bus routes. M102 has 12,131 riders a day, also receives a grade of F with an average speed of 4.4 miles per hour, which is worse than 95.4% of New York City bus routes. M103, 9,489 riders a day, average grade of F. And the average speed is 4.3 miles per hour, which is worse than 96.3% of New York City bus routes, and honestly is slightly faster than walking speed. If you look over here at Madison Avenue, there's a double bus lane. And what this allows for is it allows for true mass transit. And we could have bus rapid transit that truly works. So this is something near and dear to my heart is, you know, fire engines and ambulances have to move in New York City. And if you ever go to 5th Avenue and Madison Avenue, you will see that there's absolutely zero problem for these emergency vehicles to move along Madison and 5th Avenue. So this is from architecture firm WXY, which reimagined 33rd Street and 3rd Avenue. And it was published in Curbed on November 2021. And if you just take a look at what this picture is wide sidewalks. It's a bike lane. There's still room for people driving, and you can see they have a bus lane. You can envision, I don't know if you can see my arrow, but there's delivery zones. You can see a lot of trees, and this is a great city, a great place for people to live. Now on the left, you see a typical bike lane. This is from 6th Avenue in New York City, and they're pretty heavily used. You have commuters, you have children using them, you have delivery workers, and that's great. But I want to introduce you the concept of a cycle path. A cycle path is something that is truly protected from car traffic. And you can see that it's much safer, it's more inclusive, many more different kinds of people can use it. So just looking at safety, this is 3rd Avenue from 23rd Street to 96th Street over the last 5 years. 8 total fatalities, including 6 pedestrians, 1 cyclist, 1 motorist. We see 1,035 total injuries with 355 pedestrians, 162 cyclists, 518 motorists. And so we have 881 total crashes. So if you look to a similar avenue for comparison, 1st Avenue between 23rd Street and 96th Street, they just have minimal safety improvements of a bike lane and a bus lane. Before they put those in, they had 9 pedestrian deaths in the 5 years before they did that. In the last 5 years after these minimal safety improvements went in, they had 2 pedestrian deaths and a 62% decrease in pedestrian injuries. So it's clear that even just minimal safety improvements drastically improve pedestrian injuries. This is in CB8 territory. There was 1 pedestrian killed in the Upper East and 1 in the Upper West. On Upper East on 76th and 3rd. And it's honestly, 3rd Avenue is just dangerous. And you can see here a cyclist, a different crash, a cyclist and pedestrian killed in a Manhattan box truck crash on Christmas Eve, which was around 3rd Avenue, I believe 61st Street. Second deadly Upper East Side crash spurs calls for reform. 3 immigrant workers have been killed on Upper East Side streets within 2 weeks of each other, prompting demands for safety. Deadly Upper East Side intersections must be redesigned, Menon says. So we want to make 3rd Avenue the standard by which all other avenues and streets are compared against. We want this to be a great place for New York City, a great place to live. And we need delivery zones, we need benches, we need trees. So I want you to think about 3rd Avenue as a very dangerous place, and it's inherently dangerous. And each crash you look at is predictable. These are not accidents. These are predictable within a very dangerous design situation. And if we look at the proposal of wide sidewalks, true bus rapid transit, and a cycle path, this would be much safer, nicer. So in summary, what we're looking at is wide sidewalks. This is safer for pedestrians. It's safer for people with mobility issues. It's more comfortable. We're looking at livable streets, benches, trees. We're looking at bus lanes with true bus rapid transit. We need emergency vehicles that can move. This is better for driving because the more people that we get who walk, bike, and use mass transit, the less traffic is for those who really have to drive. This is about bringing New York City economy back. This is about foot traffic, delivery zones to make it easier for businesses to work. This is about cycle paths, which is safer for micromobility and is more inclusive. And frankly, we're in an environmental crisis right now. And this is also about environmental action. This is about decreased emissions for our next generation and decreased noise pollution. So with that, I just want to thank CB8 for this opportunity to speak with you. Welcome any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Barack. Just one question before I send it along to, I guess we'll start with the public, but what is the status of your efforts down between 24th and 42nd at this point? I know that you had spoken with DOT about it, so I don't know if you've made any progress and if this is moving forward in any way or if there are ongoing discussions or whatever it may be.
So CB6 separately conducted a study with Sam Schwartz and issued a direct appeal to DOT to revise 3rd Avenue. We've met with Ed Pinkar from the DOT and we did a walkthrough, and he definitely saw the dangerous situation that was taking place there. We're meeting with our elected it spans 3 elected representatives, right? Carlina Rivera, Keith Powers, and Julie Menon. So we're meeting with elected representatives. We're gathering petitions, and DOT has agreed to look into it.
And are they studying? Is this a formal study that they're going to be conducting? And is that based off of your proposal, or is that based off of the CB6 Sam Schwartz proposal?
Well, the requests to fix 3rd Avenue are coming from multiple places, certainly not just us. Certainly, the politician's office are asking for it to change. CB6 is asking for change. We're, of course, asking for it to change. Families for Safe Streets is asking for it to change. So it's coming from many different directions. We haven't seen a concrete proposal from the DOT. I'd love for you as CBA to see Third Avenue as a transit corridor. Really, the boundary between CB6 and CB8 is artificial, and Third Avenue is really a transit core. So it would really be nice to fix, the whole thing.
And then jump in with a quick comment, Craig.
Sure.
Just two other things I think to mention about people who've signed on. We had a sign on from the prior borough president and also from Mark Levine. And Colleen, I think, is on this Zoom call. I'm not going to put you on the spot, Colleen, but to be fair to us, we met with Colleen and Ed Pinkard. Ed did say to us in October of last year that he was going to come back, I think, at the end of this year with a study of what they could do in what they call the near medium term. Now, I don't know if things have shifted with the change in administration, but that's what we heard last. But I think we're getting all the support we need. This went from being nothing to something which people are very excited about. So I'm going to stop talking now because lots of other people deserve the opportunity to speak.
All right, thank you, Paul. All right, so let's start with members of the public. The first hand I see raised is Leah Hanlon. Can we please unmute Leah?
Hi, thank you. Could you tell us what the basis of the percentage 76% is? What's the source of that? And is it cars registered to Upper East Side addresses?
This is US Census Bureau data. And this is for households with a vehicle for all of Manhattan. I have seen the numbers for Upper East Side. They're not that different from those numbers. They're pretty similar, but I don't have them off the top of my head.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow. It's the census number, but
it's
not
the US.
It's
the data is from the US Census Bureau from all of Manhattan. That's where those numbers come from.
But not from the Upper East Side.
I have seen the numbers from the Upper East Side, and they're fairly similar, but I just don't have them offhand.
We had a meeting a number of months back. We're discussing car ownership rates on the Upper East Side, and I could look back, but I do recall that they were pretty similar. I think we actually had data based off of census block level or block group data, so even more specific than just the entire community district. So obviously it varied based off of the specific block group, but but there was a range, but I think the numbers are reflective approximately of Manhattan's broader figures.
My question is mainly that many people don't register their cars here because the insurance is very expensive. So a lot of people who park on the street have out-of-state registrations or suburban ones. It's hard to tell the suburban ones because the plates are New York, but I was curious as to whether that was reflected.
I doubt any kind of illegal activity would be reflected.
Well, no, but wait a minute.
That's not illegal
the census asks if you have a car. They don't say you're registered. So
does it? I mean, I don't remember that on my census, but I'll take your word for it.
Right. Chuck's exactly right. The census does not ask if you legally own a car or where your car is registered. It is literally a question of do you own a car or do you have access to a vehicle? There are different questions depending on the questionnaire that is used.
I would think it's pretty accurate data, I would say.
Thank you.
If I may just add one tiny fact, the numbers for the Upper East Side were, I think, a couple of points higher than the whole Manhattan average, which makes sense.
I would assume that, Paul, too.
Yeah.
Because people have a lot of, people have cars here.
Yep.
All right. Next, I say Liam Jeffries.
All right, can you hear me first off?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so my name is Liam Jeffries. I live on 62nd Street and 3rd Avenue, which is actually one block up from where the box truck crash happened a while back. I am in complete support of everything that Paul and Brock is trying to do. And full disclosure, I am both a signatory on their petition for 3rd Avenue, and I've also helped them collect signatures for the program. I support this because I think they did a very good job in highlighting in the presentation that Third Avenue is simply dangerous. It's really the car traffic there is intense. It's intense to the point that it's actively dangerous if you're a pedestrian to cross the street. I have had several instances where there have been cars that have simply just haven't respected the traffic laws that well. And as I recall, I believe there was a moment several years back where, as a cyclist, I actually had a broken arm from a crash that occurred on 3rd Avenue and 76th Street. So this is something that's very near and dear to me. I've lived in this area my entire life. For all of my life, 3rd Avenue has been a car sewer. Like there's been no thought put in whatsoever. People who are not drivers, who don't own cars, which, as Barack has pointed out, is a very distinct minority of the population here. So I am in full support of this, and I hope that that the study is done to determine how to make this happen, and I hope to see something like this happen fairly soon. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Liam. Next, we have Hindi Shakhtar. Will you please unmute Hindi?
Hindi, just look for a button on your screen.
Okay, I think she's
Am I
unmuted.
okay? Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Great. So I'm Hindi Shakhtar. I'm on the steering committee of Families for Safe Streets, and I've lived in CBA territory for over 50 years. I'm a cyclist, I'm a pedestrian, I'm a car driver. And in all of those personas, I use 3rd Avenue. And 3rd Avenue needs work, particularly if you are a cyclist. It is dangerous. I take my grandchildren on the Metro North out of Grand Central to cycle in Westchester or Putnam. And then when we come home to our own home territory, 3rd Avenue is not a street we can take uptown. We have 1st Avenue, and that's a wonderful improvement. But wouldn't it be wonderful if we could take some of the things we've learned at 1st and 2nd Avenue and add them to the repertoire of 3rd Avenue? And indeed, like Barack and Paul have said, make it a boulevard, make it a boulevard of safety. It would be a wonderful thing for CB8 to be in on the ground as supporters of this important safety improvement. It would be a wonderful thing for everybody here to say, enough crashes, enough loss of life, enough lack of designing for speed rather than safety, and to rethink 3rd Avenue so that, again, as Barack said, everybody would benefit: pedestrians, cyclists, and car drivers. Since I have all 3 personas, I have 3 chances to benefit. And I certainly hope those benefits come soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Hindi. Next, we have Judy Schneider.
Thank you for the presentation. I think that last slide was quite lovely. The Boulevard, room for the bikers, the walkers, I think. But I also think 26th Street and 3rd Avenue is very different than 64th or 65th Street and 3rd Avenue, which is where I was today. The car traffic is beyond control. It was all backed up
Truck traffic, I didn't hear a word in this presentation about trucks. We know that First and Second Avenue, which is bumper to bumper all the time now, at least in the 60s, it is, and those are truck routes. Third Avenue is not designated as a truck route. I don't see how you can bring that down to 2 lanes of moving vehicles with all practicality and have this plan work, at least in the 60s or the 70s for that matter. I don't think it works up here. I think there are Ubers, there are trucks, there's just too much traffic to talk about. Since we formed the East 60s Neighborhood Association, our first main issue, and to this day, 30 years later, is still our issue, is the problem with traffic and the 59th Street Bridge. So I don't see this plan working. Although it's lovely, I don't see it working in this area. I think it needs a lot more tickling. And what are you going to do with all the lanes of traffic I saw today when you turn it down to 2 lanes of traffic? It's just not going to work.
All right, thank you, Judy. Barack, can you just speak to, I know you mentioned that the Sam Schwartz study. I know from what I recall reading about it, that was more of a traditional complete streets approach, similar to what First and Second Avenue are like. Is that correct, if I recall? And if so, I guess my question is, are we talking specifically about your design concept, which is the WXY proposal that you displayed, or are we just talking about different options that could be considered, including one that is still incorporates bus lanes and bike lanes and pedestrian improvements, but may still be able to accommodate traffic? And can you also just speak to the question regarding how trucks are being handled in terms of those proposals as well?
Right, yeah, thank you for the question. The idea is that, we're not going to be able to continue the same way. The more lanes of traffic you have, the more traffic you're going to have by induced demand. The idea is to give people options of how to get around the city and get people on buses that can move, and that will decrease the traffic. That, and combined with congestion pricing, to reduce the amount of people driving into Manhattan. As far as trucks, it's going to be up to the DOT to see which plan they want to do, right? There's the our plan, there's a WXY plan, there's CB6 plans, so there's many different plans on the book. DOT, I would guess, would come up with their own plan. The key, what we want from CB8 and what we're looking for, is not to leave it a complete dangerous mess where people are just dying left and right. It really does need to be redone. As far as how deliveries are done, on 14th Street, for example, trucks can use the bus lane. So that might be something that could work. But in the Sam Schwartz study, they did show that the 2 lanes could handle the traffic. And it is about inducing the demand to get people on buses and other forms of mass transit and transportation.
Can I jump in there, Barack, with that? That we have a great example of what happened about 3 years ago on 14th Street. So there was huge uproar about the idea of basically buses only and banning cars mostly from 14th Street. And people fought it tooth and nail. Carmageddon was going to come. 13th and 15th and 17th and 12th will be blocked and choked. And the weekend that the switch was turned, nothing happened. And in fact, I went there that weekend. You could talk to somebody across 14th Street on Union Square because there was no cars. And it's amazing. What happens is this induced demand works both ways. Every time we build new highways and widen them, whether it's in Britain or here, any country, more cars come, and it works the other way as well. On 14th Street now, it takes you 22 minutes to get across from the one side of Manhattan to the other. It used to be 45 minutes. No one takes the bus across for 45 minutes unless they have to, and it's terrible if they have to. But if every 10 blocks or so you could get across town 20, 25 minutes zipping across, and if you really have to drive, if you're somebody who's got mobility issues, or you need to get somewhere urgently for an ambulance, for example, those people should have safer streets and easier streets to drive on. The other people who don't need them as much, they find there are easier ways to travel. That's how induced demand works. There are lots of reasons to support the idea of all this stuff, but as Barack just said, we can't just leave those people are dying every week or so or month.
All right, thank you. So next we have from the public, David Warren.
Hi. Oops, sorry, I'm sorry about that. Sorry about that. I apologize.
That's okay.
I wanted to say thank you and good evening to everyone. I support Barack's plan wholeheartedly. I don't live in the area. I live in CB4. However, I do commute by bike, and I would shop in your area more frequently if I was able to, if the cycle path was put in. So I'm a big supporter of the cycle path, and thank you, Paul and Barack, for your plan, and Liam also. So that's what I wanted to say. So I hope you vote unanimously for this plan.
All right, thank you, David. All right, next we have Devin.
Hi, sorry, I'm gonna have my camera off. I'm actually walking over the west side right now from York Avenue, and of course I crossed 3rd Avenue. And I couldn't agree more that it is just really dangerous to have a highway, 7-lane highway running through one of the most dense residential neighborhoods in the United States. And we've seen the results of that. I mean, I first got involved in this board after a young woman was killed on 60th and 3rd Avenue in 2013. And then we've just seen in the past 2 months, 3 people struck and killed at intersections on 3rd Avenue. So I think this would be an absolutely wonderful thing to have, to widen the sidewalks, have a protected bike lane, have bus rapid transit. I think it would be fantastic. And I'll just remind members of the committee that the mayor, both of our city council members, were elected on a platform of redesigning our streets to make them safer and to make them for people and not just for cars. So I think it's imperative for this board to provide that local knowledge, that community knowledge, to nudge them in the right direction, to show DOT where would be a good place to transform the streets for people and not just for cars. And I think 3rd Avenue is the obvious place to do that.
All right, thank you very much, Devin. Next, we have Matt Lewis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt. I do not live in the area. I live in Morningside Heights, but I frequently commute through and travel to the Upper East Side, either by bike or bus, to shop, to eat at restaurants, visit friends, basically to spend money in the area. So first, I wanted to commend you, Barack, on a fantastic presentation. That was really a master class, so thank you. My primary motivation for supporting this redesign is that of safety. As I said, I'm a cyclist. 3rd Avenue is an incredibly dangerous place to ride and cross the street. So much so that I often just avoid it altogether, take a different avenue. The wide street encourages speeding and reckless driving and often puts cyclists in danger as there's no bike lane and puts them in conflict with cars. So to summarize, I support the redesign, I support safe streets, and I hope the board unanimously approves this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Janet Liff.
Hi, thank you. So I want to say too, I think conceptually, I think this is amazing and inspiring. And we really need, it's easy to like cut around the edges. Oh, we'll do all this, do all of that, but why not kind of dream big to transform the city? And as well as the safety, that the thing I think that's also safety is environment. We have to move towards a new new paradigm that prioritizes people and bikes and transit. And you look at what's happening in the world, creating this much space for cars is like not the way that we're going to go. On a more granular level, I don't live in the neighborhood. My sister's on 67th and 3rd. My mother's on 77th and Lex. So I'm there a lot, and I work in commercial real estate. So for our small businesses, pedestrians are the number one. Like if they're happy, the businesses are happy. And then sort of bikes, there have been studies that people on bikes shop more than cars. And then cars are not even on the map because most of they're just passing through. And so I think when you look at this plan, it's sort of like degrees of local, that by provide like the people who really use the space are what are prioritized here. People are the most local, the people walking, and then the cyclists, and then, you know, the cars really are just passing through. And for people who need to move through, the efficiency of a bus, you know, if you've ever seen a visual of, 50 people on a bus versus 50 cars, which take up, 10 blocks versus a small corner, I mean, that disconnect is huge. So of course, you're going to want to prioritize the buses for the people who need to move through. And then the last point, Barack and Paul talked about induced demand. So the other word that's the pair with that is disappearing traffic. And when you restrict driving, it's really remarkable. It does go the other way and cars actually disappear. So we shouldn't be afraid of doing something kind of this exciting. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Janet. Next, we have Andrea Peterson.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay, my name's Andrea Peterson, and I'm a longtime New Yorker and bicyclist and pedestrian. And I ride my bike all around the city, and I stay away from 3rd Avenue. It's a frightening experience. It is something that needs to change. And I think this vision that Barack has presented with Paul is what New York needs on every area of the city. And I think the CB should really vote in favor of it and show their support of doing things that will put people first and is much more people friendly. And listening to the presentation before Barack's, a lot of the same issues kept coming up about the sidewalks, the greenery, blah, 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 blah. And I think this is a chance for you guys to get behind something that will really move New York City into a much more people-friendly place and a good vision for the future. So I wholly support it, and I hope you do as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I think our last, okay, another hand may go up, but we have Dylan Geronimo Kennedy, who at this point it seems to be our last public. There may be one more after.
First off, I just want to thank Brock and those who helped work on this presentation. I thought it was excellently done. We talked a little bit about induced demand, and I just wanted to share some details about my own life that can kind of point to how those things happen. So a little background on me, I moved into the neighborhood very recently. I live right off of 3rd. And when I moved to the neighborhood, I sold my car in part because of the additional opportunities afforded to go by bike, to go by transit, just to walk to things in your area. I was from a part of the Northwest Bronx where it was kind of difficult to get to lots of necessities just by foot. So that is one example of once things were available for me, I got rid of a car. I will say there are circumstances where I will still take something like an Uber. And the most frequent circumstance that I can think of are cases where I'd like to get somewhere by bus. It's something that, is not well served by the subways right now. But the buses are so slow, and I'm with either my girlfriend or a few friends, and I can't justify to them, let's all get in a bus and get there in 40 minutes. And so if we had faster buses, that pulls us from needing an Uber, and as fewer people need Ubers or Lyfts or taxis, then fewer of them will be on the streets since demand's lower. Also, another example of this, when I'm a very infrequent biker, I'm not a particularly strong biker, and so longer trips can wear on me. And oftentimes, because I'm right off 3rd now, if I want to go somewhere, which is to my west, a bike trip involves going over 1, 2, 3 avenues east. And then when I have to then go back that other direction. And so it makes the trip much harder. And so just having more opportunities for me to be able to take that on bike would make it a lot easier for me and less reliance on the occasional taxi trip for things that are not well served. So I just wanted to share those examples from my own life. And then just one final anecdote that because I live on 3rd, the car noise can be really, really bad. And I'd much prefer it if some of those lanes were put towards bikes or buses, which tend to be much quieter. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Dylan. We now have Oliver New.
Hi, everyone. I'm Oliver. I don't live in the area, but I do city bike all around the city, and I do spend a lot of time on the east side. Just overall, Barack, I want to thank you so much for an excellent presentation. This is really insightful. I just kind of want to echo a lot of what everyone's been saying, which is that 3rd Avenue in general for bikers, I tend to avoid it. It's just extremely scary. It's impossible for me to know that I will be safe going down the street. But I do want to point out that, you know, as somebody who bikes to get to places who can have other options, I do have the option of staying away. But for a lot of essential workers, for delivery workers that we all, you know, possibly relied on, very much relied on during the depths of the pandemic, you know, these are the people who don't necessarily have the option of staying away from such a dangerous street. I just want to, you know, reiterate how urgent of an issue is that so many people have died on such a dangerous street. I think it's kind of a little unbelievable that we won't take meaningful steps, as Barack has pointed out, to protect people that we relied on so heavily. So I really encourage the community board to vote heavily in favor of this.
All right, thank you. I see no more members of the public, so let's move on to board members. So first we have Valerie Mason. All right, is Valerie unmuted or?
Just as soon as she unmutes. Are you saying come back to you? So
I was going to, if not, we'll come back to her.
She nodded yes to that.
Okay, I didn't have her on my screen. All right, let's go to Alita then.
Go ahead, Alita.
Hi, I'm all for safe streets, but this has all the hallmarks of it pushed by transportation alternatives to change the landscape of New York. The reason I say that is because I Googled Mr., and I'm sorry, I'm terrible at names, Mr. Feldman, and found that he donates a not insignificant amount of money to transportation alternatives. I noticed that in Streets blog, they're talking about how they've made a lot of inroads into getting 3rd Avenue to limit cars or getting elected officials to support that. So I think we should know if this is a transportation alternatives effort, as it is with so many things that they're in the background, but are really pushes to get cars off the streets of New York. I think honesty goes a long way. Second of all, I don't know how 3rd Avenue is 7 lanes unless you count parking lanes. Third of all, I find it somewhat dishonest to say that it's really good for stores to have all of these bike lanes when the failure of City Bike to move its docks has affected the ability of restaurants to participate in the open restaurants program and affected the ability of people to get out of taxis or get out of buses and go into stores. Well, I'm not sure about buses, but to get out of taxis and go into stores without having to trip over bike racks that are on the avenues. I also noticed that it would make much more sense and it would be a lot more understandable, a push for bikes, if there was a willingness to support bikes having to comply with traffic regulations. They don't. And whenever anyone asks for bikes to comply with traffic regulations, Transportation Alternatives considers those of us who speak out about that to be whiners and complainers and anti-bike. And that's just wrong. If you're interested in safety, then there should be a call for safety from cyclists as well as from cars and trucks and buses. All of that is important. We're all pedestrians at some point. And frankly, I fear crossing 2nd Avenue and 1st Avenue where there are bike lanes because bikes go the wrong way. Bikes don't stop at red lights. Bikes don't care. There were scooters in the roads. And yesterday, or the day before, I don't remember what avenue I was on. I think it was Madison, but there was a scooter just transversing Madison Avenue like it was an open highway in the countryside. There was no stopping. He was on the sidewalk in one of those little mini motorcycles, not a regular scooter, but one of those gas powered things that seem to be unregulated. I'd also have to say that I don't know what a cycle path is. It looks like it's on the sidewalk. Is that true? Because we all know that bikes are on the sidewalks as well as on the street and as well as going in the wrong direction. So I'd like to know exactly what that is before you ask the community board to support it. Again, I'm in favor of safety. I think there is, and part of it is that the streets are just too crowded. And it comes from what I think is a lot of overdevelopment, forcing more and more congestion into a denser and denser place, and people are frustrated, and there's overall a lack of conformity to what had been social norms, not only but basically by everybody these days, and that includes cars, and that contributes to the lack of safety and the failure to comply with traffic regulations. But that applies to everybody, and I don't know. I think there needs to be a lot more information. I'd also like to know how many speakers who are here tonight were urged to be here by Transportation Alternatives, because they all seem to be reading from the same script about how dangerous Third Avenue is. And I can't believe that that's true compared to other well-trafficked, densely populated, congested streets across not only Manhattan, but across some of the areas of the boroughs as well. So there's script reading. I'm sure Transportation Alternatives is behind this. And it's not that I oppose them in the sense of getting bicycle safety, but that they manipulate from behind the scenes. And I don't like feeling manipulated. So that's what I have to say here. There's not enough information about this. I also have a question about zoning, because I don't know if the sidewalks are made wider, does that affect anything about height or density of buildings? And if that's true, that needs to be accounted for in legislation
I
as
can
well.
tell you it's not true. It doesn't.
Okay, I don't know. I'm just asking.
No, I can give you the answer. I mean,
okay,
that goes. It goes with floor area ratio. It's all how big the lot is and what and there's zoning lot mergers and other stuff. But the sidewalk has nothing to do with it.
Okay.
And I respectfully ask that any other speakers not make accusations or try to provide information that they obtained about someone by doing Google searches. I think it's disrespectful to the speaker who's here in his time to try to make an accusation about someone. And even if it's true, if they're representing a legitimate organization, that even if you don't support their policies and their advocacy, they're still not an organization that should be disparaged in a way where you're calling someone out for being part of an organization that is not doing anything wrong in that sense. So I just respectfully ask that others just be a little more respectful.
Craig, I've been disparaged because I've opposed some of Transportation's Alternatives push for things relating to bicycles. And I don't like that either. I just ask for honesty. Mr. Feldman is entitled to donate to whom he wants to donate. But all I ask is that there be some honesty about what's going on here in order to enable the board to make a full and fair and open decision and to bring a full and fair and open dialogue to it. And if I offended anyone, I really apologize, because that was certainly not my intent. My intent was to bring about an honest discussion, and that's all. And to consider pedestrians in all of this. While there's lip service paid to pedestrians, I don't really have the sense that pedestrians are considered in this. And so I'll stop here and thank you.
And I'm not questioning I'm not trying to push back on your comments on and your opinions on the matter. It was just, I thought that was a personal attack, and I thought that would go against some of the decorum rules that we've been talking about as a community board.
I don't mean it to be a personal attack. And again, I apologize if it was perceived that way. I'm just really looking for honesty. And if it was honest, then I apologize for that too. It's just my sense of it. And it's based on just prior history and news articles. So I apologize. I don't want to offend anyone or hurt anyone's feelings or do anything that might be perceived as not calling for additional safety in New York. There needs to be, I absolutely agree. And again, I think it's created in large part because of additional congestion and density and just an overall failure to think about other people these days. So I'll stop here and thank you.
Let me just ask, I don't know whether Barack Friedman.
Yes.
Well, Friedman, I'm so sorry. Thank you.
Would like to say, you don't have to, but if you'd like to make a comment, you can.
No, that's not allowed.
Back and forth. Yes, no, I think it is because I think that Alita asked a question about made an implication that somehow this was all from transportation or sponsored by transportation alternatives or whatever. And I think that ought to be on the record one way or the other. But they don't have to. Either Barack or Paul, if they want to comment on that, because I think a comment was made, and I think we ought to set the record straight if they want to.
I'm happy to make a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Barack and I are volunteers. We met each other back in April. Basically said we have to do something about Third Avenue. We got going with that campaign, and I think it wasn't until 4 or 5 months in after we collected, we got a petition engine from TA, but until 4 or 5 months in, they didn't take us seriously in terms of having us, how can I put it? We run this campaign with other volunteers. It's as simple as that. TA is a volunteer-led organization. It's simply that. We're not an organization. We're just volunteers who, I live in the Upper East Side, Barack lives in Midtown, and we hate seeing people die. We hate seeing the way the streets live. That's why we do what we do. And if somebody wants to question our motives, they're welcome to do that. But it's wholly unpleasant to hear someone talk about things like this when we're trying to do this to give people a better place to live, safer streets, and have less people dying. The other thing the lady asked about was cycle paths. It's my absolute favorite topic. We have bike lanes in this city. The best bike lane we have supposedly in Manhattan is 2nd Avenue. And I've said this before, I won't let my kids ride on it because it's not safe. A cycle path is simply a place where the bikes in the cycle path are segregated from both the pedestrians, so not on the sidewalk, and not with the cars either. There are 3 separate spaces. And every single study has been done and shown in whatever country you want, including this country, whenever you separate the causes of conflict, danger goes down and deaths go down and injuries go down for everyone, including motorists, but especially including pedestrians. Everyone has their own space and it's safer that way. That's why we're doing this. Barack, do you want to add anything?
Well, first of all, I don't take any offense, and I appreciate your comments, and I hope I think you brought up a lot of comments. I hope an opportunity to address all of them. Basically, this is a grassroots campaign. Clearly, we're looking for alternative forms of transportation. We want people, look, I have children, I have a family, I live on 3rd Avenue. It's dangerous for them. Somebody died right in front of my apartment, got run over by a truck. She's a 21-year-old girl. It's frankly just really dangerous. Yes, I do believe in bus rapid transit. I do believe that people should be safe cycling. I do believe in wider sidewalks. And the data shows that these safety improvements help pedestrians. I want them for my children. I want my children to be safe when they're crossing the street, when they're walking down the sidewalk, and the data shows it. As far as rule breaking on 3rd Avenue, the rule breaking we see most commonly is double parking. Even, Chick-fil-A, when I walk past Chick-fil-A, I see triple parking, even quadruple parking, I don't even know what you call that, quadruple double parking. I see speeding, I see failure to yield to pedestrians. It's really dangerous. I don't take any offense to your comments, and I wish you well, and I'm sure you mean the best and want the safest for us. If finger wagging and yelling at people to follow the rules worked, and I could just say, hey, stop speeding. If that worked, New York City would be the safest place in the world. But finger wagging and yelling at people is not going to work. We need to redesign the streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Craig, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess we have Valerie Mason next.
Thanks, and I apologize for not being ready. I didn't realize I was going to be the first person. Just as a point of information before I make my comments, Craig and Chuck, this was characterized as a discussion tonight, so I appreciate the persons from the public saying, you know, they want us to vote in favor of something, but I just want to understand we're not going to propose any resolutions, because if that were the case, there does seem to be from the public a rather one-sided opinion of this plan. And I think we would have to post this as something that would, you know, just more widely in the community to ensure that we're hearing from everyone. So that's my question to you both.
Yeah, we did phrase it as a discussion, and it's probably, you know, I don't know that we were thinking of any particular vote at this point.
Okay,
you know, but
well,
I mean, it is something that could come up for a vote, though, I think at a
right. Well, I
prior
appreciate
meeting.
that,
Another
but I
meeting.
think if that's something that the Transportation Committee is going, if we're at a point where we're going to advocate for a specific plan, then I would say that it would have to be ahead of a meeting that was widely publicized throughout the community, so that we would be sure that we would be hearing from everyone.
Well, I think if I don't think we are advocating for any specific plan. If we were to do something, I think anyone is free to put forward a resolution if they wish to say we want to perhaps study concepts that could improve safety for pedestrian and to provide more safe space for pedestrians, cyclists, and buses. I don't think that's a binding approach that would require the entire us to have to go through a much more formal process and to have to hold another formal discussion on it, because anything that would happen would be far down the line. I'm not saying it should. I'm just saying that we've had recent occurrences where we've had votes take place without any notices at all. So this is a discussion that.
Well, I appreciate that. The other thing is I want to apologize when I said I don't think that discussion could happen. I thought it was on the mute button. I was talking to myself. But I do appreciate this plan being put forward. You know, right now, even though I'm talking as a board member, the East 72nd Street Neighborhood Association has been very active in traffic safety. We are very aware of the problems of pedestrian safety on 3rd Avenue. And we actually went out with the Department of Transportation to look at what is considered one of the most dangerous corners in all of Manhattan, which is the corner of 72nd Street and 3rd Avenue. And I have to say, when I went out there with the Department of Transportation, who soon thereafter changed the light and then told us it's going to be almost 2 years, if we're lucky, if we can get a granite barrier to make sure that pedestrians aren't hurt. That's they actually indicated to me that when they changed the lights on the corner, they never came out to see what effect the change of the lights originally had. So while I appreciate this vision for 3rd Avenue, I just really, I can't get on board with this for so many reasons. Number one, I mean, I don't see the 7 lanes of traffic on 3rd Avenue. I see basically 3 because Fresh Direct and Federal Express and UPS have basically a dedicated parking lane all across 3rd Avenue. And then on the other side, we have a bus lane. I don't see, I mean, the horrible accidents that we have seen of late are mostly accidents that are happening with left turns. And it's just, I mean, I think that needs to be explored. And I think Councilmember Menon is committed to doing that. I also take issue with the fact that one of the reasons that she was elected was based on redesigning the avenue. That is not the case. There was a candidate in the primary who was very big on redesigning the streetscape. And I don't believe Councilmember Menon really, that was the major part of her platform, but she can speak for herself. But all I can say is that I mean, I hear that you're concerned about Third Avenue, but a lot of these accidents are also happening on First and Second Avenues, where we have dedicated bike lanes and there is extreme congestion. The cars are not moving that quickly. And we're still having accidents with the so-called quieting of the streets that was supposed to be brought on by bike lanes. In my opinion, and the opinion of my organization, the bike lanes have not quieted anything. And quite the contrary, they have upped the volume on all sorts of accidents that are happening between, unfortunately, bikers and cars. I saw 2 of those this week, where the bikes have run into cars that were standing still, waiting to make a left turn. The way the Department of Transportation has decided to redesign the streets, and we saw some groups come before us, I think it was right before we went into COVID, to have that DOT had new designs for these, for left turns where there are bike lanes, because they are not working, and we all agree with that. I think that, you know, in October of 2021, I believe in the Streets blog, a survey by Sam Schwartz said there were actually, even though in the 2010s, the number of cars that were coming into Manhattan was really on the decrease, the pandemic is seeing a huge number of cars that are coming into the city, and people are not using public transportation. They're not. And the city and state are doing nothing to encourage people to use public transportation. And I just want to say that my group has been fighting for an express bus stop at 72nd Street and 2nd and 1st Avenues for over 7 years. And we can't even get a bus stop to encourage people to use the bus on the Upper East Side. So I appreciate the vision. I can't say that I agree with any of it, because I don't see how the sidewalks can be made. I mean, if you want to make the sidewalks bigger, you've got to take parking off the street. And that would mean that the city and state of New York would be committed and force the real estate developers in the city of New York to start building buildings with parking in them, because cars are not going to go away, whether they are gas fueled, electric, or whatever. They're not going to go away. And that's the only way to widen the street, in my opinion, is to take parking off of it and start putting it back underground and building parking garages, and not allowing any of these buildings or hospitals to be put up any longer without provision for the parking that the people who are going to come into these facilities. I mean, it's shocking to me that, you know, we have a developer come before zoning a couple of weeks ago who's building a medical building on 79th and 2nd Avenue, and has basically said that, wow, he doesn't think parking will be an issue, but that maybe they'll use the surrounding parking lots. Well, there are no surrounding parking lots. And if there are, they're way out of the price range of people who have to go see these doctors. So I appreciate your plan, but I think the real plan is and you want to make the streets wider. Well, then we've got to put pressure on the city and state to do some more with respect to parking, because the cars are not going to go away. And thank you, I'm done.
All right, thank you, Valerie. Just as a point of information, in transportation lingo, when we talk about number of lanes, that does include parking lanes. We're not just talking about functional lanes in terms of where traffic's moving. We're talking about lanes dedicated to vehicles. So in 3rd Avenue's case, within our community district, it is 7 lanes, just like on 2nd Avenue, it counts as 6, although 1 is considered a bus lane during certain hours. So at certain hours, it's reduced to 5 moving lanes for vehicular traffic, plus the bus lane, and so on and so forth. In Lexington, same thing. It's less because it's a narrower street. But 3rd Avenue is considered a 7-lane street because it's the 5 moving lanes plus the 2 parking lanes. Next, we have Michelle.
We have a public members.
Yes. Let me just say a couple of things. After somebody from the board or public makes a statement or expresses their views, with the exception of adding additional information, as Craig just did, I don't think it's appropriate to hear rebuttals from the presenters, unless you're going to unmute everybody and let them rebut what everybody else is saying. So I don't think that's an appropriate format. So
No, that was only because
that.
there were specific questions that were asked. It wasn't a rebuttal that we're
not
inviting them every time someone speaks.
Exactly. All right. Okay. All right. Comment.
But if you have a question, I
have a few questions and I have a few comments, as have others. First of all those households that you talk about that you claim do not have cars, they all ride in cars. Those who do not have cars are in any one of the car shares. And that's one of the reasons that traffic is so high, dense. And that's also one of the reasons that people who don't have cars, that's why they don't have cars in many cases, because they have options for using cars without supporting one on a year-round basis. Also, while you're counting cars, I wonder if you have ever counted how many households have bicycles. I remember that traffic and danger on the streets became ever more present when bicycles were introduced. This is going back 7 to 10 years ago, when bike usage was 2.5% of the population was biking, and when all of the bike lanes started to proliferate, because that was a very strong lobby, very, very powerful lobby. It was sponsored by the Bloomberg administration. It started then, and it was also something that his transportation and he wanted. And as soon as you started to put more and more entities on the street, that's when the accidents went up. I also would appreciate we not sound holier than thou that we don't want to see people dying. Nobody on this call wants to see anybody dying. Turn on your TV set if you want to be upset about dying. So stop that rhetoric. It's just silly. The other thing is, I submit that this program would actually inhibit the access of emergency vehicles. I don't think it will help them at all, because they need to have an option of getting down multiple lanes of traffic. So I don't think that will help. I think that Lexington Avenue has never been more crowded and more difficult and a place to be avoided since the bus lane was put in, which was supposed to move traffic, because most people would be on buses and they would move traffic. Well, Lexington is down to one lane, if you can get it, between the loading and unloading of the pharmacies and the supermarkets and the bus lane not permitting access to cars on the other side. You've got one lane of traffic down Lexington. That has improved nothing in any way. The concept that traffic goes away if you don't have facilities for it, that's like saying if you want to alleviate traffic to the Hamptons, let's close the LIE. And boy, that'll help, because all those people will stop going to the Hamptons. It's just not going to happen. So I think you have to take a little, I know there are a lot of bicycle advocates here. There are also, in addition to be cycling advocates, there are also people who are so anti-car that they would almost trade anything in order to get them off the road. But let me tell you, I was on this board when we voted, when the City Planning Commission, in its not so infinite wisdom, voted in an effort to get rid of cars, because that was the push from that administration. They voted to eliminate the requirement to put parking garages in newly built apartment buildings based on the ratio of the number of cars to apartments, whatever their formula was. And when it came before this board approved it. We had a lot of advocates on there and anti-car people, and they didn't see the ramifications of that. So I hope that could be reversed. That did this city no benefit of any kind. And when you talk about buses and public transportation really facilitating speed of getting around, the big study that was done on 86th Street, and I was a member of the association at the time, the big study after they put in the bus lane, and after they put in the rapid bus, it saved 1 minute from 86th Street in York to 86th and not even West End. I think it was the highway. 1 minute in travel time after completely turning around the traffic, worsening the traffic on 86th Street, because that too was a bus lane and now regular cars can't use it. And if there's a double parked car or a car making a turn, it adds to the traffic. So a lot more has to be looked at here without the fundamental biases. And also, if you have such a proliferation of bikers and you have such a proliferation of wanting to continue to build out their facility, you have to bring them on board with law enforcement. And hand in hand with that would be licensing, something that makes them identifiable, something that makes them responsible, something that makes them compliant, and something that makes them where somebody who was hurt or anything would have some liability claim. They can't operate in a complete vacuum. So if we can put all that kind of passion aside, and also when you talk about the possibility of a resolution tonight, the big group that is not on this call, because I'm sure they didn't realize it was relevant to them, are all the businesses. You make a statement that this is better for business because business is mainly visited by pedestrians. We don't know that that's a true statement. I'm not sure that's a true statement at all. And so I know businesses that went out of business when the bike lanes came in because their customers couldn't come. And one big example were bodegas that serviced the taxi cab industry, where the cabs would pull in and use their facilities, the restroom, and buy snacks, et cetera, et cetera. Once the bike lane went in, this man's business dropped over 40% because the taxis had no access. And that's true all over the city on all kinds of avenues. So a lot of these statements that were made here tonight in terms of the presentation, and being a volunteer myself and having come up with plans and trying to get them approved, et cetera, believe me, I appreciate all your effort. I appreciate all your hard work, but it is from your point of view. It's what you think is best. Others may or may not agree with you, but I certainly don't think that anything should be voted on tonight, because not all of the stakeholders were here tonight, and nor was it, even though it was put down on the agenda as a discussion, it was not listed in the way that we do when we're notifying the public that we're actually going to vote on a specific thing. And everybody in this committee has seen that. We can get hundreds of people out when you're telling them you're voting specifically on this or specifically on that. So those are my comments. I just hope, I hope they're taken into consideration, and you can understand that others have a different point of view, and for very good reason, while still not wanting to see people dying. That's a very dramatic statement. We all understand that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Michelle. I guess next
we have a public member here, I think, don't we?
They have already spoken.
All right, they've already spoken. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very quick. I absolutely agree with my fellow community members and everything that they have said. And you would have seen the two women who were riding side by side on the sidewalk on 2nd Avenue and chatting today. I represent the senior citizens, and I don't have a bicycle, but I don't want to be hit by one. Your plan, as all plans, you present a very rosy picture, and I understand that you're selling it, but you haven't taken into consideration that when you widen the sidewalk, that you are also going to shorten it in certain places, because restaurants are going to be able, where they weren't before, be able to come on to the sidewalk. That's number one. Number two, you don't even talk about double parked trailer trucks who are making deliveries. And that is 5 days a week. This is a city that doesn't fit into a city in the Netherlands where everybody bike rides because, or whatever it is. We don't fit. We are a very, very voluminous city. We have a lot of people. We have a lot of cars. We have a lot of bicycles. Now we have a lot of mopeds, and we have electrical bicycles. And I don't really feel that that is taken into consideration when you are doing your plans. You are starting with a premise and you are pushing it into that mold. That mold doesn't really exist. And that's what you're going to have difficulty with us going forward. I wish you well. Thank you for this. It always makes us think, but this also makes us angry because we really feel that nobody who's doing this really understands what's going on. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rita. Next we have Sharon.
And thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Paul and Barack for the presentation, really appreciate it. And also Craig and Chuck for the discussion that we're having now. For transparency, I am a cyclist. I'm obviously a pedestrian as well. And at its core, Barack's presentation is about street design. And the idea of improving street design can come from anyone. And I really see this as this is what democracy looks like. These ideas, no matter where they come from, if they improve our streets and more specifically improve street design, I think that that's what we need to be focusing on. And I want to say, though, that and Paul, I presentation gave a sense that it was anti-car. And I find that a tad troubling because I see cycling and driving and walking complementary transportation modality. We can carve out space. Although car space has obviously occupied a significant amount of the public realm, and I do believe that that the space that is given to cars has been turned over to cars should absolutely be reduced. So I would make one suggestion. I think the summary of the presentation, the summary page, the last page of the presentation should a summary of the benefit for pedestrians, cyclists, and also drivers. When you slow down traffic, whether or not there is less traffic, when you slow down traffic, it means that it's a safer street, and it's a safer street for drivers as well. And I'm not sure that the presentation really presented the idea, because at its core, it's about street design. And good street design is good for drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists. And so I am hoping You know what? It's a wonderful presentation, and I have to tell you, I get it 100%. Love the psychopaths, by the way. Love the psychopaths. However, I'm not sure that the presentation was edited to a specific audience, and that's something that you should consider doing, especially emphasizing how improved street design is better for everyone. Secondly, I'd like to ask either Paul or Barack, and then I have another comment after they answer the question. Are you considering approaching CB11 as well?
Thank you for the feedback, and thank you for everybody's feedback, really. We have been focused on CB6, and when we saw the amount of crashes that were happening in the CB8 territory, and we saw what 3rd Avenue looks almost the same as what it looks like in CB6 territory, then we extended it up. So we didn't have a plan to extend further, but I definitely think it would benefit the entire course of 3rd Avenue.
Yes, thank you. Because I think Paul's vision, I think, and certainly is the right vision. And I am so happy to see something that is different, actually, than what we normally would see in a presentation. It has some very interesting ideas, and I'm so glad that we're talking about them. And I am hoping that and thank you very much in terms of your comments about appreciating the feedback overall from all of the community, not only Community Board 8, the public, but also Community Board 8 board members. But I very much support the vision overall. I think it's the right way to go for everyone. Just today, I had to drive my elderly mom, who is not able to take public transportation to an appointment. And so it's not just the use of Ubers or cars. I mean, sometimes you just, there is a need. There is a need to use a variety of transportation modalities. And and as I'm driving, I'm thinking about how we can incorporate better street design as well, because I know that it's better for me and it's better for my mom who's with me. It's better for her when I have to help her and I can't and it's difficult sometimes to help her out of the car. And so all of it has to be taken into consideration. But on its face, I really want to summarize that I support this proposal unequivocally. And by the way, no matter where the idea came from.
Thank you. Listen, we have a few more things that we have to talk about, so I hope people can keep their remarks. And I think people who've spoken before, I think we shouldn't probably call on them, but we have others who haven't spoken. We should get those people who haven't spoken.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Agreed.
Craig.
All right, so Barry, you're up.
Yes, thank you very much. Just 5 words. The York Avenue traffic study. That goes back about 15 years. We were hell-bent to get a traffic study on York Avenue because of the various problems that we had regarding the access to the FDR Drive and institutions. And we were determined to get the plan done. And the Department of Transportation was on board. They came back to the community board and said, aha, the name of the traffic study is how to make York Avenue one way. That is, they had the answer to the problem that they were designed to study in the name of the program. So the whole thing collapsed. I don't want to see a plan for street design collapse because of the preconceived notions of the planner. I would like to be sure that the city agencies, the DOT, the city council members affected are participating in this, make the contribution, raise the funds to hire an independent traffic analyst. No names, please. And that's one way to get this thing done and get it done properly without any preconceived notions in the solution. Let's be realistic. The city now is in a totally different space than it was 2 years ago. Traffic on subway passenger ridership hasn't come back to 50% yet. Bus traffic, bus passengers is the same. So we have more cars. We have more deliveries by FedEx and UPS and so on, clogging the main avenue, not only First and Second, which is their designated routes, but they're backing up Third Avenue and Lexington Avenue. We have a very serious problem, and it needs a serious approach to the solution. And I say, let's come back. Let's get the city on board. Let's get DOT to say, yes, we're going to fund a study for how to make your Third Avenue, pick the margins. We're going to study that until we get a solution that works for all participants, bike riders, passengers, pedestrians, cars, trucks, whoever wants to use the public way. And my only problem with what we've heard tonight is it seems to me very, very well one-sided. And I'd like to be sure that we're covering all the bases and we shine a bright light on this. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Barry. Next we have Lori.
Hi, thank you very much. I want to thank Paul and I want to thank Barak for having the courage to broach this subject, which could be described as the third rail with the community board. But I'm not going to add to the drama. I'm just simply going to tell my little story, okay? I own a car, and I was someone who, before the pandemic, would drive a lot. I won't say everywhere, but I drove a decent amount in the city. After the pandemic, and after and most recently I've started to use the Q train, and it's fabulous. I now have become, it's so difficult to park, and it's so crowded on the streets, and there's incredible traffic. And so I've just stopped using my car except to go out of the city. That's what my car is for now. I go to visit my parents in Westchester, and and to visit my boyfriend's family in New Jersey. But that's it. We don't use the car within the city confines. And I have a parking garage that I can park it in, so that's no problem. And I just want to say that when people are forced to find alternatives, you find them. And so, and I'm like, I grew up in the suburbs. I was always shocked that like people didn't have a driver's license, because like it was a rite of passage when I was growing up. And when you're 16, you went the day of your birthday to go get the license, and but we've evolved, and I really believe, like, both of my children don't have cars, and my daughter doesn't even have her license yet. She's like 24 years old. So you can live without a car in Manhattan. I won't say in the Queens and Bronx, but we're talking about Manhattan. And it is definitely possible to use public transportation, and you should use public transportation when it's at all possible. And so that's all I want to say is that like when obstacles are presented, you make the decisions to get around them, and getting around them in my case was not relying on the car. It's like when I park the car now, like I won't even go to like pick up my daughter who lives, you know, a few blocks away when I'm taking her to my mother's house. You know, I'm like, no, you walk here. I'm not going to go like drive across town to pick you up and then go. You walk or whatever, and then we'll go. So, I mean, I just think that what you said is true. That when you put obstacles in front of people, be it cost, be it space, be it whatever, they will find alternatives to get around. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Laurie. All right, we have Billy Freeland now.
Good evening, everybody. I probably shouldn't say, I'll try to keep it brief, I'll jinx it. It's good to see you all, and I'm sorry I missed the beginning of this presentation. As some of you know, I'm out of the city and really kind of tied up on some other things, but I just wanted to make a few comments. First, you know, maybe talking from the data and then just going to personal experience. On the data, and I know these discussions can be very contentious, but here's what we know from DOT, that when we put in 2nd Avenue bike lane, crashes involving with injuries, crashes that resulted in injury went down 15%. Crashes involving pedestrians fell 21%. Our own resolutions that we've passed in the past have shown data that shows that injuries are down as much as 30% with some of these protected bike lanes. Another, I think, interesting data point is if you look in Brooklyn at the Prospect Park West protected bike lane, before that lane was installed, the data show 50% of cyclists rode on the sidewalk. After that lane was installed, I believe the number is 2, maybe 3% of cyclists rode on the sidewalk. And it was mentioned earlier, and forgive me, Valerie, because I only came in sort of in the middle of your comment, but about Councilmember Menon, forgive me, I don't know the full context, but I know that what she has said when she was campaigning and what she says currently is true, that protected bike lanes are good not just for cyclists, they're good for pedestrians because they reduce injuries, because they are traffic calming. I would argue that they're good for drivers too, having, believe it or not, having driven a car in Manhattan. I really hate it when a cyclist is weaving in and out of traffic, often because they don't have a protected bike lane to go to. It makes me nervous. I'm sure it makes them nervous. You know, protected bike lanes provide some sanity on the street. Now, let me just speak to my experience as a cyclist, which is I live on 86th Street, as some of you know. And if I want to go to Central Park for a nice afternoon of cycling, I typically would go from 86th Street and then to what? I got to get to the entrance on around 90th Street at 5th Avenue. So I have to go to 86th Street, up 3rd Avenue, cut across the, by the way, unprotected bike lane, but nevertheless a bike lane at, I think, 91st Street, then go down 5th Avenue and cut into the park. What does that mean? That means from 86th Street to 91st Street, I'm driving without a protected bike lane. I'm swerving in and out of traffic. I am trying to hug to the left lane because I don't want to be where the buses are, but I'm often encountering trucks and cars that are double parked, sometimes triple parked. We've talked as a committee about the parking situation outside the Chick-fil-A. So my perspective as a neighbor, as a cyclist, is the current conditions are completely unacceptable. And if you live on 5th Avenue, Madison Park, Lexington, if you want to go uptown, you have to go all the way to 1st Avenue and cut up if you want to use a protected bike lane. Now, if you want to maybe risk your life, you could take another street. And as I just mentioned, I do that and I hate it. So I think we owe it to everyone who uses the street to adopt measures that are actually going to bring real safety. I know this plan that Paul has presented is about more than just a bike lane. I think there's a lot of smart ideas. We should be widening sidewalks to help pedestrians. We should be having more dedicated bus lanes. We should be doing better with loading and unloading drop-off spots. But I would urge this committee to take seriously this year the idea of doing something about a bike lane on 3rd Avenue. I believe it is desperately needed. It is a very wide avenue. We have the space. As Paul's statistics showed, most of the space is dedicated to cars. Lastly, I don't want there to be any mistaking. This should not be a cyclist versus drivers situation. We all stand to benefit, in my opinion, from better designed streets, So for anyone who thinks, oh, Billy's being an empty car or whatever, no, that is not my position. Everyone deserves respect on the road. But that includes cyclists who right now, given the space that's dedicated to them on 3rd Avenue, are being given zero respect. So I hope we'll take this up in the future this year, and I hope we'll all think very seriously about what we can do better. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Billy. Rebecca Dancor.
Hi, I'm going to keep my comments brief, and I so apologize to our two presenters that I missed the presentation. Wondering if this was mentioned. If not, I think it's a point. When I went over the slides, I noticed that you spoke about how much more room there is for cars compared to pedestrians and any other mode of transportation. And in our area, 3rd Avenue is kind of the most traffic heavy street. So clearly something isn't working. And I think Barry's idea of a study was great. And I'd love them to kind of evaluate that as well, because if there's so much room for cars, and yet there's so much traffic on that particular avenue, there's got to be a way to improve that as well, not just the other areas you focused on. And I hope we continue this discussion again in the future, because I don't think it seems like we're going to be voting tonight.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. All right, and next we have, I saw Mrs. Brown's hand up, but it just went down. I don't know if she wanted to speak or not.
So maybe we can wrap it up, Craig.
I was going to speak, but Barry and Rebecca's comments and Billy's comments, sentiments are similar to mine. So there's no need to repeat it. I just think it's important that we move on. And I want to thank Barack and Paul for their presentation. But I strongly believe a study is needed which addresses all modes of transportation. It's important that we should be able to share the road. Thank you.
Craig, I just like to say a couple things. One, I think this committee always has a reputation of wanting to hear new ideas and new thoughts. So I think we very much appreciate the work that Paul and Barack have done. I mean, they've seen a problem and they think needs a solution to, and I think a lot of people would agree with that. And I think it's the kind of thing where we, a new proposal ought to be looked at, and I think Barry's right. It ought to be studied, and we ought to get some of the facts to back up what the proposal stands for. And I think there are facts. I mean, everyone has their own viewpoints, but I think the facts are always helpful. And so we appreciate the effort, and I think it's something to be further considered as we go forward. And let's see if we can make progress, because I think in the end our board generally comes out with trying to make something that will improve city life and with trying to balance all the various interests. So we thank you both very much for this.
Yeah,
all right, I think we should go on.
I was going to say,
go ahead, Craig. Why don't you have the last word?
No, I was just going to say, I think I agree with you. I want to thank Paul and Barack for their work here. I think you've given us some food for thought here. I was familiar with the plans just from reading about it in different publications and in my planning circles. But I think it's great to see different visions, whether they are something that could be potentially near-term opportunities or further down the line, and to open up the door to just think about what we actually need to do to address some of the issues. And I think we've definitely identified some issues and concerns that exist on 3rd Avenue. Like, for me personally, as someone who is not really a biker, I think it is sort of unbelievable that we don't have a bus lane on 3rd Avenue. Right now we have a bus lane on Lexington that's relatively new, but what's the purpose of having a bus lane in one direction if you can't benefit from it in the other direction for the same route? So I think that as we move forward and think about this further, I think we can definitely revisit whether it be this specifically or a more generic discussion on supporting a potential study of Third Avenue, of Third Avenue and opportunities to improve it in a multimodal fashion, I think that's where it seems like we're headed down that road, no pun intended, to come back to that being the focal point going forward. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their comments and their participation. And yes, let's move on.
I want to say thank you to CBA and thank you for everybody's comments. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, let's head to item number 3, which is discussion regarding how to support restaurants that wish to participate in the DOT open restaurants program, but are unable to do that due to conflicts with other uses or parking regulations. And this came up obviously because we had, the restaurant that everyone wanted to see get some relief, but in the end, it really didn't work because of the location and where, and the situation right in front of the restaurant, and it didn't make sense to change the regulation, and the DOT basically didn't want to really do it. Now, we have an overall discussion that we have to have with DOT about what the permanent program is going to look at, and and what would really be better, obviously, to have DOT here, but they haven't been ready yet to come before us to talk about what the permanent program will look at. I mean, they've laid out some general things, but we want to get them as soon as possible to come before us to explain what they're thinking of and to get our comments and critiques on issues that we might want to see change. And they've promised, and when I've talked to Ed Pinkart, he's promised that we will have an opportunity to do that before they actually set any regulations in stone and proceed ahead. But we'd like to get them, we'd like to get them to come as soon as possible. But we thought we had, we thought we would have.
It's Colleen Chattergood from DOT.
Oh yeah, Colleen, yeah.
Hey, I wanted to let you know, as many of you know, City Council passed the outdoor dining. So
right.
we are looking in terms of, again, the guidelines and proposals that we would like to come and discuss before the community board. So as soon as Borough Commissioner Pinkar mentioned, as soon as we have something to share, we will definitely come to the community boards to give a presentation, okay?
Yeah, we would like to have that hopefully as soon as possible.
And I will take that back.
Okay. Now, we thought we might, we might have a discussion if we can, if people have thoughts about how to do this. It's sort of, it's a little tricky because usually it's a situation where you have some traffic regulation that's there, and maybe you're able to get a variance. Maybe it's a way. Maybe there ought to be more leeway to get variances depending on the individual situation. And but I don't know if people have thoughts on this that they might want to lay out. Any comments here? Any public comments particularly?
I don't see any public comments, but I'll just remind everybody, if you do want to comment, you can go to the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen, press the raise hand button.
Okay, I see a couple of, I see a couple of board hands raised. I see costs. Why don't we unmute costs?
Yeah, I've got a question for Colleen. When we had the text amendment change come before us, they showed examples of what the structures, what the sidewalk and what the street structures should look like. Is DOT going to change that?
You know what, Cos, we are looking at everything in terms of what was initially put out, because what we put out was under the temporary program. So now this is going to be permanent. There are some aspects of changes that are going to be forthcoming with the permanent program. It could be the design of the OR structures. It could be just tables and chairs and umbrellas out there. And again, I don't know what those guidelines are yet that I can share with you or be more specific with you, but just so that you know, there are going to be changes with the program, yes.
So what was shown to us at the text amendment was incorrect.
No, it's not that it's incorrect, that what was shown is under the temporary program.
No, it was under the permanent program. What was proposed as a text amendment?
I will find out and I can get back to you on that.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I think they had some pictures and things like that of what it might look like, but it wasn't that definite.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was definitely that's what it, was going to be.
Okay.
Okay.
Isn't it the case that, at least from the articles I've read, that the permanent program will require that all outdoor dining areas be truly removable, and that they are expected, aside from potentially being seasonal, that they will be required to be removed instead of being there permanently?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that I had seen. I don't know, Colleen, if you can comment on that.
That's one of the things that's on the table as an option. And again, I don't want to tell you something that hasn't been confirmed yet.
Of course.
But I have a feeling that is something that we are exploring too.
And what about the sidewalk structures? From the text amendment, it was no more new enclosed sidewalk structures or sidewalk cafes. Yet you know that there's thousands of illegal structures on the sidewalk obstructing traffic, obstructing the pedestrians, but nothing has been done about them.
So Kaz, we have been going around, inspectors have been going around looking at a lot of these locations, and those that are not in compliance, they have been issued 24-hour notice to be in compliant. So, I mean, I know the inspection is not happening imminently as soon as what we would expect it to be, because there's so many, structures and, outdoor dining cafes out there, but we are getting to them. And again, under the new program, the numbers might not be as large as what they are currently now. And again, I don't want to tell you what it is going to be because I don't have much information to share. But when we come back to the community board, I think these are all answers that we will have, information of or for.
Also, another question I have is, all these cafes and restaurants have built these expensive structures. Are they going to be reimbursed for demolishing them, the illegal ones that they've been approved, they've been let go for the past 2 years? Are they going to be reimbursed for demolishing them?
What city
I'm not going to comment on that. I can't comment on
I would
that.
be shocked if they are reimbursed.
Yeah, and you know what? The city didn't tell, the owners, hey, go out and build a $30,000 structure. They took that upon them to do that.
Yeah, we all know that. I'm just curious to see what's going to go on.
Yeah.
Thanks, Colleen.
You're welcome,
Okay,
Todd.
Michelle, I think is next.
Yeah, so just to clarify, this thing was done in 2 parts. And what was passed, correct me if I'm wrong, Colleen, but what was passed in this last vote last week was the zoning text amendment. And that zoning text amendment had nothing to do with the rules and regulations that will govern the program once it's implemented. The zoning text opened all of the areas that are currently zoned so that they don't permit outdoor dining to now permit outdoor dining. To my mind, that was the most problematic part of this entire program, is that the city residential areas, all those areas that were not permitted to have sidewalk cafes in the past, can now have sidewalk cafes. The next question is, what does the Sidewalk Cafe look like when you put it in? That has not been determined yet. That's going to be governed by a separate set of rules. I have seen in the press and at the hearing, I was at that hearing for 9 hours, as were some others on this call. They said that there would not be construction sites. The aim was to have it tables and chairs, but it includes the roadbed in addition to the street. So that is something new. That includes the roadbed. However, the proposal at the moment is not to have a physical structure. The other part of this is that any physical structure, even if they switched gear and they said, oh yes, we are going to have physical structures, the chair of the committee actually said that all of the current structures will have to come down, and those restaurants will have to reapply with a plan for the structure that they want to be built. So those are the two conflicting things out there yet. Each side testified to each of those, even though they're contradictory. So that I don't know. But a lot of damage in my mind, I realize not in a lot of people's, to my mind, was done when they lifted the zoning. That opens a big issue. I want to just comment on what the subject is of item number 3. We're on item number 3, and you want to talk about how to support them. To my mind, I was not supportive of this program, as you know. And I want to remind everybody that the vote that was taken on this program was not on the rules and regulations, but the vote that was taken in September 21 was on the zoning text amendment, not on any of the rules and regulations and anything about the program. It was only on the zoning text amendment. I'm not sure everybody was aware of that. I'm not sure everybody read that zoning text amendment. It was passed by this board, 27 in favor, 15 opposed. So while the board approved it, it was not an overwhelming wipeout of an approval. There was plenty of room for dissent in that. And I just want you to all remember that it had nothing to do with the rules. Anyway, it's too late. That thing has been passed. I hope somewhere down the road it could be reversed. But in terms of what you're asking about tonight, you know, sometimes life is just not fair. Sometimes it is what it is. And you can't always accommodate everybody for everything. Some of our comments have been in testimony. Why are you giving all this deference to the restaurant community? What about the guy who has a shoe store, or he's selling handbags or whatever? He also was hurt during the pandemic. So some of you would say, yeah, well, he should be able to sell in the street also. I don't go along with that. I feel very badly for him. I don't want to see all commerce come onto the streets of Manhattan and turn this city into one big outdoor bazaar with all the problems and ramifications that entails, which should be obvious to everybody. Everything that is a business issue that goes on indoors at the moment will be brought outdoors if something like that happens. So if you're looking for a way to breach current law or current zoning or whatever the current permission is about having outdoor dining, let's say a restaurant is in front of a hydrant and he can't put dining out. He's in a bus stop, he can't put dining out. I don't want all that to be altered, because that opens it up to the handbag store, the shoe store, and everybody else. And that's just not a way we want to go. Sometimes you just have to say, it's the luck of the draw. You took your premises. We understand that you didn't take it understanding that someday you could have an outdoor seating. We understand that's the circumstances. Look what's happened to some of us as residents. You buy an apartment, you pay a lot of money for your apartment, or you rent paying a lot of money for your apartment, and all of a sudden there's an open restaurant under your window. You didn't buy it or rent it knowing that that was going to happen. So is that fair for the renter? Well, you know, the city says, too bad. That's our new program, and that's what we're instituting. Well, it's the same concept to the restaurant owner in front of a bus stop or in front of a hydrant or anybody else who had premises, either bought them or rented them without knowing what the future holds. And unfortunately, that is what has happened in the city. A Pandora's box was opened. I'm not sure we're going to be able to put the lid back on, but I certainly don't want to see it expanded so that we disregard additional current rules and regulations over and above the zoning, which was just thrown under the bus. So that's my comment about the discussion that you're about to have in terms of other restaurants breaching other laws in order to be able to do what their counterparts are, who have the luck of the draw in where their locations were. A lot of people are suffering here for exactly that reason, and you can't correct it for everybody. The best that you could have done was let things be the way they are and had this program extended temporarily until the pandemic subsides, and then review it periodically and let it fade away so that we returned to our prior zoning and our prior law. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Russell is next. Or
you've actually skipped over Alita a couple of times. I don't know.
Well, I think I think others had their hand up first before Alita.
Okay.
As I saw it. But I'll get back to Alita. I'm not.
Thanks. So on this issue, I think that one of the ways that this came up also is in the context of restaurants that have had, city bikes or other sorts of kind of isolated transportation infrastructure, not necessarily something affecting a whole street, although that was the issue that came up with Amali when we were looking at that. But even something like a city bike dock outside of a restaurant that prevents that restaurant from taking advantage of outdoor dining. And I think, from my perspective, it would make sense if we had essentially some sort of flexibility in, relocating some of those now that we're going to have open dining, because basically the difference between having that, to take the example of a city bike dock, having it right outside of a restaurant, for example, as opposed to down the block where there isn't a restaurant or across the street where there isn't a restaurant, is essentially negligible from the perspective of the location of the dock, that's there, and making sure that you're going to have bikes available in that location or bike docking stations in that location. But for the particular restaurant that's affected, makes a huge difference. And I think open restaurants is a major change in how these restaurants and bars are going to operate in the future. And I think it makes sense to accommodate them. And I understand, this is a situation where nobody knew that any of this stuff was coming. And so I think sort of one-time accommodations for people who are affected in this way make a lot of sense, because it really is the difference between, some of these restaurants being able to stay in business and have their livelihood versus not. And I certainly understand the inclination to say, well, going forward, we can't sort of do this on a rolling basis. And once open restaurants is sort of in place on a permanent basis, maybe you just sort of say caveat emptor, and you know what you're getting into with certain locations, and some locations won't be able to accommodate this and others will. But I think under the present circumstances, I think it makes sense to make this kind of an accommodation for businesses who are affected in this way. And again, I think the impact on the availability of those, that bike infrastructure, for example, is negligible. The point is not, pretext to remove city bike dock or whatever it might be. It's just to move it slightly, across the street, down the block, again, whatever the case may be. So it's still essentially in the same area and available for people. But, it makes it a little easier on the restaurants. And again, they're able to stay in business and survive. And the other thing I'll say, just to Michelle's point about other businesses. I mean, I do think the situation with restaurants is unique in terms of both how they were affected by the pandemic, because I think there were just larger concerns of people sitting inside a restaurant eating for an extended period of time, as opposed to sort of browsing in a business or whatever, that the effect wasn't the same. And so there wasn't the same need for outdoor facilities for these other businesses. But also going forward, I just think it's there's a, I'm not too worried, I guess, about the idea of a slippery slope. I don't think that there's going to be a widespread desire for people to do their shoe shopping outdoors, for example, in the same way that people enjoy outdoor dining, which has really been the basis for why the program is becoming permanent. So that's my view on this, and that's why, glad that we're discussing it, and I'm hoping we can essentially encourage DOT to accommodate restaurant owners in this way.
Yeah, I think the what I see is that the zoning thing has been passed, and we are going to now come up and discuss exactly what a program looks like, and the kinds of things that Russell talking about will be part of that discussion. And I think there's a lot of things that will be discussed, and I don't know that you're necessarily going to have more restaurants that are there, because I think the criteria for having an outdoor restaurant, is going to be probably stricter than it was during the pandemic. And if it appears to be that you're not going to have structures there, that's the whole other thing. But we'll get to that discussion, and I think everything is going to be on the table. And I think it is a different situation, and I think we'll discuss it with those facts in mind.
Let me just add one point here, which is the point I'm making about trying to make accommodations for restaurants. This is something that actually applies, I think, currently during the emergency program. It's not limited to the permanent program, which isn't even going to take effect until next year. And in fact, it may not even really primarily be an issue for the permanent program. I think it's really something that affects the temporary program, which is still in place because restaurants are still struggling. And so, from my perspective, it's something that I think we would want to encourage. I think it's almost a separate issue from what the rules of the road are going to be for the permanent program. And just to say that, in the sort of near term where businesses are struggling to stay afloat, can we accommodate them in this way, encouraging DOT to make those kinds of accommodations for them so that they can actually survive and in fact make it to next year when the permanent program is going to be in effect, and when hopefully things are going to be more back to normal. This is an issue for people right now. So that's really what I think we need.
Thank you, Russell. Let me get to Alita Camp now. Alita, we'll go to Roberta.
Thanks, Chuck. I'll try and be
Back
brief.
on.
Thank you. And thank you, Colleen. There are certain aspects that community boards right now are foreclosed from my reading of the legislation, and the second piece of legislation, Introduction 31, which I believe is the legislation the City Council is looking at, which is that community boards are not involved in approving or even looking at applications of restaurants for roadbed dining as opposed to sidewalk dining. Second, I have, and there are some other things that community boards and my understanding is City Council members are precluded from. And so I've been thinking that we should be ahead of this instead of waiting until DOT comes up with rules, but that's not really responsive to the issue that's before us, which is how to help restaurants that are unable to participate in the program. So what I'm wondering is the rate of going out of business for restaurants, either at fire hydrants or bus stops or someplace where they couldn't go out onto the sidewalk versus those restaurants that were able to, and if there was a substantially different amount of going out of business. Second, I think it was Kaz had mentioned at other meetings that restaurants receive federal funding, the grants or the loans from the pandemic financial support based on how many people they hired. So those restaurants that were outdoors were able to get more funding, which again increased the inequities between restaurants that didn't have outdoor space. And so there's that issue. And then I'm wondering, it wouldn't help to help those restaurants have, let's say, another Manhattan food market in a school parking lot, because not a parking lot, playground, because those are usually in residential neighborhoods, and that would just exacerbate perceived problems, but maybe there's some way that the city could actually work with restaurants to help them find spaces and negotiate with landlords if they do want to move and stay within the neighborhood, because there's a lot to be said for being a neighborhood restaurant and having the built-in market that you get from being in the same space. Or maybe there's a fund that could be set up that's funded by the restaurants that are able to be outside on the sidewalk effectively, maybe geometrically increasing their business, to do something to help those restaurants that were unable to and are being forced to go out of business. It just doesn't seem right to have the city upend itself in so many ways to support certain restaurants and not others. And then last, I would say that in thinking about all of this, that the one size fits all does not really work, it seems, for New York. And I'll stop there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Rebecca Dangor, can we unmute Rebecca?
Hi, Russell kind of touched on this, but I think I was the one who wanted us to have this, continued on our discussion, because I was very disappointed that on the committee level, we were so supportive of the Amali restaurant, and then we kind of fully changed our minds at the full board. I was just wondering, have we re-followed up with them? Is there any way we could maybe involve him in future discussions? Because to me, the thing that just really kind of upset me was the change in our decision without him being involved, and we kind of promised him support. And I think I would love to find a way to either, even if I think people made some good arguments why that particular street might not work, but at least to kind of amend something that I felt uncomfortable with as a community board.
Yeah, I think we should probably reach out to them and do that. I don't think we have done that yet. We probably think it's a good idea, Rebecca. And since this is coming up, and since we'll see if there's any thoughts that he has about that at this point.
I think that would just be an important thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Peter Borak, can we unmute Peter?
Everybody. I just have to say, restaurants are in a unique position because during the pandemic, you can wear a mask, you can go shoe shopping and you can wear a mask, but you can indoors, but you can't eat indoors. And so I think restaurants are uniquely positioned. And I would just urge members of the committee to think about the fact that while not all restaurants are equally situated, and some clearly just don't have the benefit of having really good space to have outdoor dining, we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. And if we can save some restaurants and help some restaurants thrive, I think the committee should try and do that. Unemployment in New York City is much higher than the national average, and the hospitality industry is just lagging so far behind other industries that I don't know. It hurts me a little bit inside to hear people saying that, well, not all restaurants have the same ability, so we're not going to help restaurants that we can help. So I would just urge people to maybe realign that thinking a little bit. That's all. And
thank you, Peter.
Can I actually ask Colleen a question, since Michelle's already spoken? And
yeah, go
yes.
ahead.
Hi, Colleen. I was just wondering if you just off the top of your mind would be able to share with us what the process typically is for moving city bike stations, and if it's an onerous process or if it's something that's relatively simple and straightforward, just so we can understand that in terms of being able to formulate how we may want to move forward, and potentially asking to accommodate restaurants that may be impacted by current city bike docking stations. And I know in my mind, I think it would make a lot of sense as long as we were able to replace a station with an alternate location in close proximity. I think there's no reason why we should have restaurants that otherwise would have the ability to take advantage of another DOT program lose out, especially since we're going into a third summer coming up of open restaurants, where we all see the restaurants that have the outdoor dining really are benefiting from it.
Right. And you know, when this temporary program was launched, we made it clear that we would be unable to relocate, you know, city bike stations, muni meters, bike racks, and so forth to accommodate the outdoor dining. In order for us to relocate a bike share station, we work with Lyft to do that. There's a whole process involved in terms of finding a location that's feasible, that may not conflict with, you know, a building, loading operations, or any other land use that's on the particular street. And again, it depends, because the only time that we would be amendable and it, you know, to relocate a bike share station, and if there's construction on a particular block and the contractor needs that space, we would relocate it temporarily, find another location, and install the bike share station. But again, initially when the program was launched, we made it clear that we would not relocate you know, bike share stations, because if that's the case, then we would have to do this citywide. And it would be really difficult for us to find suitable locations to put these stations. It would be a challenge for us to do that.
Okay, so it sounds like from what you're saying, this is both a short-term and long-term challenge, and maybe we should be thinking about the long-term opportunities that could potentially result, if it happens quickly enough, in some short-term opportunities. So I think
exactly
what you're saying here is that if we wanted to take some form of action, it would be that if anyone on the board or if, as a committee, we supported the concept of prioritizing open restaurant spaces for restaurants that may have conflicts with city bike stations and relocating them, that we may want to ask DOT to start that process now of taking inventory of city bike stations and where they currently may conflict with restaurants that otherwise would have that opportunity to take advantage of it, even in the emergency program, and you essentially assume that that would still hold true for the permanent program as well in most cases.
Okay. All right. I'd like to finish this up. I know we have a couple of people who want to, if we can keep it short, Michelle and Peter, because you've both spoken. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thanks, Chuck. Firstly, with regard to the bike docks, we had a lot of opposition as a neighborhood to some of the locations initially because they crossed the doorways of medical offices, of apartment buildings. There's one office right here on 85th and Park. It's a doctor's office. A wheelchair person can't get to it without going a half a block to a crosswalk and coming back around, because the bike rack, which goes about 90 feet, transverses, the whole building. So all over the city, you have that problem with the bike racks crossing doorways in many, many places. So I would support trying to accommodate a restaurant and moving it, but not to the detriment of somebody else on the block who had not been obstructed, and now you obstruct somebody else. I don't think there's a better or a worse person that should be obstructed. I mean, I don't think that's a trade-off that's a good thing to make. The other thing is, you should all know, was in the papers, is that there's now the whole takeout drink. You know how people were taking mixed drinks out of restaurants and standing in the street and drinking. That was against the law originally. Now there's a proposal to make that permanent, that you're allowed to take drinks out. Well, where's the consideration of the liquor stores? Where's the consideration of the quality of life? Would you like to live near or above a restaurant that's allowing carry out, so people who don't have a seat at their cafes will be standing around and having cocktails. I mean, you can't say that all this isn't going to affect the quality of life of everybody, and that a lot of it is domino. And I think you have to be very, very careful. So I'm not happy about that program. These are difficult issues, but you know, this came up. I had thought about it actually a long, long time ago, but thought it wasn't even a possibility. And then somebody else suggested it, and I thought, oh, well, I think that's a good idea. Maybe some of this stuff should be on a ballot. Somebody, you know, maybe it should go. We have so many people who are adversely affected, and then the restaurant and entertainment industry is supportive of all this. Well, maybe it should go on a ballot initiative, and we should see how it all plays out. But I think you have to bear all of this in mind. So sure, you want to help them by moving the bike racks, great, but don't move it in front of somebody else who didn't have it before and now they're miserable. That's not a solution as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Michelle. Peter? You're muted, Peter. Yeah, you have to unmute.
Great, thanks. Real quick, Colleen, I remember a couple months ago, you had said that there was actually a fund that was established to help restaurants build the outdoor sheds. Did I?
I'm sorry, Peter, say that again. I didn't hear
Sure.
you.
Maybe a year or so ago, I recall you saying that the city was actually providing funding for restaurants to build the outdoor sheds. Do I remember that correctly?
No, we were not providing funding. What we were doing, we were helping to provide the sandbags and barricades. But in terms of monetary funding, no.
So all the restaurants basically came out of pocket to build those themselves?
They did, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Hey, Russell, a last word.
Thanks. So first, just very briefly, I'll say I'm optimistic that in situations where you have this conflict with outdoor dining, that we'll be able to find some sort of an alternative location that sort of works for everybody. But I just want to clarify in terms of sort of where we're landing. It sounds to me like basically in circumstances where this situation arises, that's going to be a sort of conversation, I guess, offline between the board and DOT about sort of working on trying to figure out what alternatives might be and that kind of thing. And I just want to make sure that that's my understanding. It sounds like a kind of where we've landed and sort of what the committee's comfortable with, and just want to make sure that that's sort of how we're expecting to kind of handle this thing as, restaurants are raising these conflicts with us that they may have and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's right. We'll try to see what
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks,
Great.
everyone. Okay, item number 4. This is a continuing discussion. This came up in the context, obviously, the building on 92nd Street, where we did approve parking in front of it. No standing either, actually. And about some of the criteria that we should consider for future requests for no parking or no standing in front of building entrances. Obviously, I think as we saw in that discussion, no parking is a little harder to, it doesn't give the relief that people think it gives, because people can still park there under certain conditions. And so if we want to really keep something vacant, it has to be no standing. But I think we ought to, our past policy was that we denied these things. People felt that was too rigid. And so the question is, if we do want to have a policy, or whether it ought to be just on a case-by-case basis and looking at the street and looking at the circumstances, then that's something we ought to think about as a committee. And so I'm open to any comments from either the public or the board on this. Is that Dean Evans? Do we see? I see.
Yes. Dean, you can unmute.
Okay.
Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think the fact that you guys, I think you're talking about the space that you just gave to the related building at 205 East 92nd Street.
Correct.
I think that's a wonderful thing for that building. I think their tenants coming in and out will definitely benefit for it and being safer. I do think that these no parking or no standing zones are a privilege, and that the board needs to realize that not every organization or business or residents respect them. My partner and I own a small rental building on 92nd Street, directly across the street from the 92nd Street Y, which has a no parking zone, which the 92nd Street Y is currently using as a dumping zone for their trash. This violates sanitation, DOT, and health code regulations. Oftentimes, community boards as well as sanitation workers are told to overlook things for certain organizations. So I invite every member to please walk down 92nd Street between Lexington and 3rd. The address is 158 East 92nd Street. It's the 92nd Street Y's loading zone, where they will put out anywhere between 100 to 300 bags of green trash into the city's street daily. They've taken this space away from the public. I would love to see it as a city bike zone. But again, if you're given a no parking zone, you should respect it and not seize it or take it away from the public like the 92nd Street Y is. I have brought this up with the sanitation committee. We had back in 2009 a resolution by Community Board 8 that they told the Y that they couldn't do this. And it's abuse. It's like you have a bully who lives across the street from you because they're the large organization and they have seized the public sidewalk and the public street. So please, I encourage all of you to come and look to see what's happening in these no parking or no standing zones, which violate so many different laws in the city.
Thank you. Listen, I can say I've been on the board a long time and no one's ever told us that we should overlook something. That's not what we do. And we'll not overlook, but look into
Thank you.
The situation, and in the past, taken away parking privileges for organizations that are abusing them. So we'll obviously we know the 92nd Street Y well, and we'll look into it and see if that's happening, they're going to have to stop that, or we will take away the privilege, and we'll go to the sanitation department too.
Perfect.
I mean, I believe you.
I don't know if you can actually see the picture on my phone, but this is what it currently looks like.
Yep. Yep. Is it in the shape of or no? Okay. All right, but we'll take a look.
Great.
We'll take a look at it. Thank you. Thanks for coming on that. Further discussion. Any? I don't see any. Did you see any? Will, I don't see any other public members.
You do have one.
Let's
Evelyn
go to
David.
Oh, okay. So Evelyn, I'm sorry, I didn't see Evelyn. David, okay. Evelyn, can we mute Evelyn?
Yes. Hi. Good evening. Long evening so far. I'm glad that you got to this last one. If this is the last one, I'm just hoping that you're going to do things on a case-by-case basis. That's actually where I stand with this, because I do park near a building entrance, but we make sure that there's a space for people to get in and out. I'm really careful about that. Actually, the doormen help me. Okay. They'd say, go back, go back, go back. No, go up, right? They want to make it perfect so people can get in and out. There's been no complaints from the building about anybody blocking in that particular building. But that now the movie people are on the move this week, this Friday. Everybody's got to move their cars. So people that park on the street don't have to just, it's, things get complicated and it drives you crazy. And then you get it back settled again. And then it just gets into an uproar. So I'm just only to say that, I hope that things get taken on a case-by-case basis out of complete necessity, because parking is really, really, really tricky. It is limited. And I know you already know this, right? So, I mean, and not everybody is for cars in New York City. And if we're parking our cars, it's because we're not driving them. Okay. So I mean, it's a tough place to live, so I'm hoping you do a case-by-case basis. I think you were very fair with 92nd Street or whatever that street was. I don't remember. It was
92nd.
What was 96? No.
92nd. No, 90 was 92nd.
92nd. Yeah, 92nd. Yeah, that was very fair discussion, and but that's a completely different situation from a lot of places who are going to go, oh, whoopee, I want a space in front of the building, and then they'll put their dorm in there and they'll rotate, I'm telling you, this opens the door for a lot of abuse. So hopefully case by case, and I guess that's the best way to handle it from my point of view, or it would be a fair way to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evelyn. Peter Borak, can we unmute Peter?
Thanks so much. Sorry to hog some time here, which I'm trying not to. I really appreciate what the public member just said. On the other view, though, and I've made this comment every time we talked about this, I think there should be some criteria that the board agrees that we can look at. They don't have to be threshold or it's not check the box, but I think there should be some consistent themes that we look at when applicants do come. I mean, I just quickly thought through what I thought of last time. We look at maybe the size of the building, unique features of the street, the community demand for the no standing. I'd also look at other parking available on that block or in the immediate vicinity, and things of that nature. I think those are what we should be looking at. We don't need to check the box, but I think if we're just purely doing this on an ad hoc basis, there's that's where claims of inconsistent actions and arbitrary actions come forward. And I just think it's better to have some sort of just maybe a framework that we look at. So when these come up, we can say, well, here's what we look at. Let's see how these criteria apply to the situation. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. Barry Schneider.
Yes, thank you. Very quickly, we should address this problem on a case-by-case basis. The rule should be no standing, because otherwise there's no enforcement. And the reason for that is the circumstances alter cases, and we need to bring that ability to our hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, Michelle. Michelle.
Yes, I agree, case by case basis, because when we do it on a case by case basis, we take into consideration everything that Peter mentioned. And if you write that down and say we have to take into consideration the size of the building, then you'll have to say, well, what size of the building are you taking into consideration? In other words, any parameter that you write down, you'll now have to define that parameter. And in fact, that will make the process less fair because it will preclude people from coming to us who might otherwise have come to us. So we absolutely will take everything like those things that Peter said into consideration, because that makes sense, but it has to be case by case, so that you're not locking anybody out from their right to come to us, and so that you're not defining the parameters so closely that you'll have no room for exception. So you know what? It's been working all these years. I mean, I'm on the board a really, really long time. This is the first real controversy we've had. And even this one, I think we solved it pretty well. We went back, we took another look, it was solved. So I would be very cautious about being any more stringent than that. I have one other question, if I may. My recollection in the past is that we had spoken to the 92nd Street Y about a garbage bin on 92nd Street in that very location that the gentleman was talking about. And that's my recollection. Am I wrong? And the second part of that is, why is it no parking? What is the reason that it's no parking now? So I would like to have a little more insight into that, but I thought we had approached them in the past. So maybe the gentleman can answer those questions.
Okay. Dean, why don't we unmute Dean? Do you want to answer? If you have an answer for those questions. Why don't we unmute Dean, Will?
He just needs to push a button.
Yeah, push your button, Dean. Yeah,
Great.
there you go. There you go.
Great. Thank you very much, Michelle. Yes, in April 15th of 2009, before a full land use committee meeting, there was a vote taken on the 92nd Street Y about having a trash bin. It was a unanimous vote that this would not be permitted in this particular area. For many, many years, the Y abided by it. They used a combination of city sanitation and private carting companies. And I just think, again, this is something that may be like a bad behavior from COVID. They started putting trash into the no parking into the city street. And during the early years or early months of COVID, it was fine. There was maybe 1 or 2 bags. Then it quickly, as the Y started functioning again, the bags started piling up. They left their metal recycling containers out in the street, and it really set a bad precedence for our entire block. All of a sudden, our entire block became filled with trash because everyone was saying, if the Y can put their trash out in the street, why can't everyone else? I've been talking to our retail on our street. We've had a sanitation supervisor out. I've been out sweeping the street and the curbs, getting all the buildings to clean it up. But you'll see hourly, the Y will just keep coming out into this no parking zone, which they said they needed for trucks for their for deliveries, but the trucks can't get in there because it's full of trash.
Okay, thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mrs. Brown, I think, is next. Can we unmute Mrs. Brown?
I see Michelle waving her hand. I think she wants to respond to the gentleman.
Well,
if it's okay with you, Chuck.
Sure. Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah, 2 things. I was going to suggest that based on that precedent, Chuck, that we write a letter to the Y, voicing, our feelings about this and the complaints we are getting. But the second part of my
Michelle,
question.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I've already spoken to the Y about it, and so they're aware, and we've shared the old resolution with them again. Councilmember Julie Menon is meeting with them this week to talk to him about it. Like this is not something that has not been addressed. And Dean, I think you're okay with me saying that he and I have been going back and forth this whole week and last week about it, and he's been working with Julie Menon's office, and there are some positive action that I don't think we need to jump into a whole thing here because
it's already
that's very valuable to know. Thank you for sharing that. That's important. The second part of my question is, why is it a no parking area?
That's what I think.
Why
Dean
was it
said
designated that?
Dean said it was for their trucks, their deliveries and stuff like that.
No, then it would be delivery zone.
Well, we'll check it. We'll check it out. We'll check it. I don't know if Colleen knows that. If Colleen, do you know? Can we have you, Colleen? Do you know about the Y there on 92nd Street? They have a no parking zone there.
That must have been done a while ago. I would have to look into it.
Okay, we'll take a look at it.
They would have the history. He would have the history.
Yeah, we'll take a look at it and see what.
Yeah, I'll get back to you in the morning on that.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, anything else, Michelle? Is that it?
No, thank you. That's fine.
Okay, Mrs. Brown.
Yes, I support the criteria case by case, but I also would like to add that perhaps a basic criteria could be established of the things that we would consider. I don't even know if the transportation would consider having a task force to go over the criteria so that we could have it as a guide. So when these various situations come up, we have something to fall back on. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you,
Mrs. Brown. I think we could come up with some things, like if you looked at the 92nd Street thing, it's a very unusual situation. It's 92nd Street is a through street that goes to the FDR Drive. We get on up or, north or south. It's a very steep street going down from 3rd Avenue to 2nd Avenue and car speed. So you're looking at a situation where you have a lot of cars and a lot of a penchant for speeding. And I think that was one of the things that a couple of the things that we looked at. And so I think that's what it is. So we'll take a look and see, and maybe we can, for further discussion the next time this comes up.
Thank you so much. Everybody. I appreciate it.
Let's go to updates from DOT. Colleen, any updates for us? Can we unmute Colleen? There she is. Is she unmuted? Not yet.
Hey, Chuck. No, I don't have any updates at the moment, but I will get back to you regarding when we will come back on the open restaurant, and I'll look into the 92nd Y.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now we have old business or new business.
Can I actually ask Colleen 2 questions quickly?
Oh, yeah, of course. Anything you want?
Hi, Colin. Two potential update questions that maybe you could shed some light on, or maybe you could look into. One, do you by chance have any updates on the whole East 78th Street Cherokee Place request that we made?
You know what? That has been assigned. I'm gonna find out where we are with them. Yeah.
Great. And then the other question that I had was, I know I had read recently about how the conversion of the south outer roadway of the Queensboro Bridge to pedestrian use is delayed. Do you have any more information on that? I know that's of great interest to some people on the board.
Where did you hear that it's been delayed?
I thought I saw an article. I forget if it was on Gothamist.
Because there is work going on.
Okay, I'll see what I can find, and I'll send it to you, and then we can
find and forward that to me, because I know we started the project.
Right. I think it had to do with the road deck replacement and how that needs to make significant progress before.
Yeah, why don't you forward that article to me, because I have a call with Bridges in the morning.
Sure. Okay, I just found something.
Okay, that would be helpful. I can check with Bridges and I'll get back to you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just found an article from AM New York, posted on February 3rd, and I know I read it elsewhere, so I'll send those your way.
Okay, great.
Okay,
thank you.
So any old or new business? I see we have some hands here. Leah Hanlon, can we unmute Leah?
Yes, hi. This was actually under the MTA section, but you can put it under new business. Since the 79th Street bus lane went in several years ago, it has not really been available as a bus lane very much of the time, because there were regularly government and commercial vehicles parked there. And every, I don't know, once a year or so, when something particularly egregious is blocking the lane, I try to call around and see what I can do to get the lanes to be enforced. And over the last week plus, a COVID tent has set up in the bus lane, and they always park at the very front of the lane so that the entire lane is useless. If they parked in the back, the bus could get in front of them and cross the intersection, but no, they park right in the front. And so I reached out to Will. I was calling round and round. I called DOT and accidentally discovered where Colleen works. I called the 19th precinct. I called Tish James' office, because I was told that they were in charge of enforcing the bus lanes up at the Attorney General. And I went round and round in circles. And the point is that as a member of the public, I don't know who enforces it. You'd think it would be the police, but they swear up and down it is not them. One common theme in the community board meetings here has been the lack of enforcement for all things transit on the Upper East Side, whether it's bicycles or bus lanes or you name it. And why is it that nobody seems to know who's in charge of enforcing these things? And if it really is maintained that it's the police department, why doesn't the commanding officer there come to a meeting and explain why there is no enforcement of anything?
Well, we did have, the first thing, maybe Colleen wants to comment on this, but just to bring you up to date, we did have a meeting with traffic enforcement. And for our community district, they have like 5 people from 59th Street to 96th Street that can ride around enforcing traffic things. And so with a lot of traffic things to enforce, that makes it difficult to get the kind of enforcement that we'd all like to see. And I think one of the things that we found out in our board, that enforcement is a hard way, even though we'd like to see more enforcement, we have to try to work around that and come up with ways to stop things without counting on enforcement to do it. In certain cases, you need it, but it's hard to get them to focus. They're really understaffed, way understaffed. And it's the traffic enforcement unit of the police department. They're a separate unit, and it's not the 19th precinct. And we had the people in charge of that here, and what they told us was not very encouraging, as I said. But I don't know, Colleen, can you take a look at that, or have somebody take a look at that? We sent a picture, Leah, I think, sent us a picture of that. And obviously, COVID testing is an important thing, but the question is, do they have to be in a bus lane like that?
Or do they need a van? Many of those tents are just tents. There are no vans.
No, well, I used to see some vans, but I haven't seen them lately. But Colleen, any thoughts on that? Or
I mean, you know what? No vehicle should be obstructing the MTA bus lane.
it's not a vehicle, it's a tent. It's like a tent.
The tent is on the sidewalk. The van that goes with the tent is in.
Yeah, I spoke with Leah. There's also other vehicles that are parked in the bus lane, and which really it boils down to traffic enforcement. And I did mention to Leah to call the 19th precinct and let them know, and I would call them too, which I did. But there is the separate traffic division, enforcement division, so that is something I could raise with them.
Yeah.
May I ask one other thing? You know, there's a bus lane on 2nd Avenue, the avenues, and there's a bus lane on the streets like 79th. And the bus lanes on the avenue are only active during rush hours. And the bus lane on 79th Street is active all day, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And in the afternoons, I believe I counted, there's only 6 buses that go down there. And it's blocked all the time anyway. That seems crazy backwards to me. There's always traffic jams on 2nd Avenue in the middle of the day. And because there's Amazon trucks unloading and they take up all the lanes. Why is that bus lane? Why isn't the bus lane open all day? But if it's not open all day, why isn't it only available for Amazon trucks to park there? And why isn't something similar on 79th? Why is it the whole day when there's like hardly any buses in the middle of the day? There's so many more efficient ways you could use that space.
I mean, we do want the bus lanes to be operating effectively, and that for them to be no delays. I mean, we look at it in terms of reliability. So
but why not on the avenue? There's so many more M15 buses than there are 79th Street buses.
I mean, that's something that DOT and MTA can look at.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Liz. Take a look at that, Colleen. Mrs. Brown, did you had another comment?
And I spoke to the commanding officer of the 19th precinct, and they were going out to do enforcement. And this likely was not a place where they were supposed to be. All these COVID-19 bans are supposed to get approval from SAPO, Street Permitting Activity Office. And the 19th precinct did not believe that they had any sort of approval to be there.
That's correct, Will. You're absolutely right. They're supposed to get a permit from Staple.
So maybe they'll do something about that.
Thank you for doing that, Will.
Yeah, of course.
Mrs. Brown.
Another location that DOT should look at is at 86th and 3rd Avenue, the southeast corner. There is a COVID testing van plus a tent, and the tent extends all the way almost to the door of AT&T, that it impedes traffic. There's only one lane, and I took some photos of it today, and I will forward it to you. But my question is for Colleen. Could you provide us with the status of the undulating study that has been scheduled for 92nd Street? Has it started? If not, do you know when it's going to start?
Can you be more specific in terms of what study you're talking about? Is it the
the undulating bump for the road?
Oh, you
for
mean
92nd
the speed hump? You mean the speed hump, right,
Speed
Mrs.
bump,
Brown?
yes, the undulator, speed bump.
Oh, the speed bump. So that speed hump requests, they take a while for studies to be initiated. It takes a few months because we have to do a lot of traffic counts during specific times of the day. And then we have other locations as well that's in the pipeline. So it's based on, when it's received. But I want to tell you that speed reduces take a few months.
All right, well, thank you.
But I will keep the board posted once we have a response.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Judy Schneider. Judy, can we unmute Judy?
Judy, just push the button.
Yes, sorry about that. Craig and Chuck, I sent you an email, which I was looking for so I could read it to you. I get from the Queensboro Bridge contract for the upper deck, to answer the question that was asked before. The contract is going to be finished the end of 2023. And they were delayed because of, I called the woman and spoke with her. They were delayed because of getting help to work on the contract and because they're replacing the upper deck with steel plates and the plates were delayed in the manufacturing. So therefore, they anticipate that the project will be done at the end of 2024. And therefore, then they will fix the outer roadways, the bike lane on one side, the pedestrians on the other side. I hope that's of some help.
Yeah, and Craig, there is a liaison for that project. Her name is Caitlin McGee. I can put you in touch with her.
Yes, I forwarded, Chuck and Craig, I forwarded you the email. So you can I'll forward it to you again. I have it up right now. You can just get onto the mailing list.
Oh, sorry, it's not Caitlin McGee, my mistake. It's Anita. Anita is her name.
Yeah, well.
Thank you, Judy.
You'll have it in a second. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. I think I just want to get an official confirmation from DOT.
Well, the heading is the Queensboro Bridge Contract BRC 231F Upper Deck Replacement, and it's from New York City DOT.
And right, and did that specifically?
Yes, it addresses what I just said. And
Okay.
Colleen, I'm sending it to you too.
Okay, good. And Craig, I'll put you in touch with Anita. You can always ask her questions about the project.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to also just raise it so that the committee was aware of it as well and see if there's anything going forward.
Great.
Okay. I think since seeing no further business, I think we are adjourned. Appreciated everyone's thoughts and participation, and we'll see everyone in a week at our full board land use meeting. Take care.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.